2021. This regular business meeting of the Osseo School Board is being conducted in person. This meeting can be monitored electronically by streaming online from the district website. An archived recording of tonight's meeting will also be available on the district website. Seated in front of you this evening from my left to your right is Director Tamara Grady.
Hello.
Director Thomas Brooks. Director Jackie Mosqueda-Jones. Myself, Kelsey Dawson-Welton. Director Tanya Simons. Director Heather Douglas. Superintendent Corey McIntyre and General Counsel Tim Palmatier are also present in the boardroom. The superintendent's cabinet and other district administrators are seated in another conference room with a live stream of this meeting being shown on a monitor. Individuals will come into the boardroom as needed. And before we get started, I wanted to welcome, we have 3 Maple Grove Senior High students today from student government class, so I hope you get a lot from this meeting today, and we're happy to see our students in the audience, so thank you for being here. Okay, so those who can, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Mosqueda-Jones will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, board members, in front of you is the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda or additions? Okay. I'm just like totally sorry. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda as is?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. The next agenda item is audience opportunity to address the school board. I'm just going to review a few guidelines for those that will speak to the board. During audience opportunity to address the board, I'll call on each speaker who has submitted a speaker card. There's one tonight. We ask that speakers keep their comments to 3 minutes. The board does not take action or discuss matters during this portion of the meeting. Speakers may be referred to the superintendent or staff if follow-up is necessary. The complete guidelines for public participation are provided on the meeting materials table and on the school board section of the district website. When I call your name, please come to the microphone, state your name, your topic, and state whether or not you are a district resident. So we have Colette. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. Guyette Hempel. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board and the community and the audience. Tonight I'm here to talk about your community education brochure. I don't believe in the critical race theory. I don't believe that we're guilty of things done by generations in the past. But we are guilty of things that we do today. Brooklyn Park kids were treated like they didn't belong in the dome when it was first built at Maple Grove High School. You talked Brooklyn Park into spending their park referendum dollars that were not aimed at a dome to create a dome at Park Center. But you know what? The U.S. Constitution says that we're to give equal education and equal opportunities across this country. Minnesota Constitution said that right from the get-go, just before the Civil War. But this district continues to fail, and I don't mean lightly. Brooklyn Park has done everything they can. The police department provides 64 activities for kids and residents to do community outreach. But this booklet only includes 2 of the district schools, both of which are north of 85th in Brooklyn Park for activities. But almost every other elementary in Maple Grove, Osseo, and Maple Grove High School and middle schools are included in this, but not Park Center, not Brooklyn Junior, not Northview. Our cops work diligently to make our communities safe. And to have this booklet only have Woodland and Edinburgh with 3 pages compared to like 40 pages of after-school activities in Maple Grove and Osseo with absolutely 0 ACT prep courses for Park Center students and Brooklyn Park students is a disaster. And that's on you and whoever approved this book. Fix the problem, because citizens like me that have worked for 20 years to have equal opportunity, that doesn't mean everybody succeeds the same, but equal opportunity is expected of our tax dollars. Get your act together, because the state representatives, Brooklyn Park City Council already know about this garbage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colette. Our next agenda item is the superintendent's report. Superintendent McIntyre.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Chair Dawson Walton, and good evening, board members. First, tonight, I just wanted to start off, it's our first meeting since the start of the school year, and I just want to take a moment to thank all of our scholars, their families, our amazing staff, and really the entire ISD 279 community for a strong start to the school year. As I shared with you in the last couple weeks, we've seen great enthusiasm and excitement throughout the first couple weeks, and I just really wanted to extend a sincere thank you to everyone. As we end the month of September and those first few weeks of school, please know how proud I am of the efforts of our staff. And our theme this year is Forging a New Path, and I'm really proud of the efforts to begin to do that. Even as we continue to adapt to the difficulties the pandemic has brought, our systems and those routines are starting to fall into place, and things are beginning to feel a little more typical, whatever that is anymore, as we focus on our scholars and their learning for the next normal. So tonight I'm just going to share with you a few highlights for the start of the year, and I'm kind of looking at Kay here to see if we have my slides ready to go. Okay. So maybe as Kay's getting ready, I'll kind of tee this up a bit here. So we always start with our points of pride, and that's a regular part of the superintendent's report to show the points of pride in our district. And our points of pride celebrate students, staff, community members who are contributing to the accomplishments of our mission, which is to inspire and prepare all students with the confidence, courage, and competence to achieve their dreams, contribute to community, and engage in a lifetime of learning. So I'll start telling some of those stories here, and hopefully we can get our pictures up here shortly. Maybe, Callan, you can give me a sense for if you think it's an easy fix. I'll just pause for a minute. There we go. It was easy. Thank you. We like easy sometimes, don't we? In the area of achieving dreams, Maple Grove Crimson scholar Christina Zhu was named a National Merit Scholarship semi-finalist. At Maple Grove Senior High, Christina is a member of the cross-country team, will play violin in the pit orchestra of this year's fall musical, and is involved in a club that works to address the negative stigma associated with mental health. Christina now has an opportunity to continue in the competition for some 7,500 national merit scholarships worth nearly $30 million that will be offered next spring. So congratulations to Christina. We're already looking forward to helping a whole new group of students, the class of 2035, achieve their dreams. The Kindergarten Information Fair will return in person this year. This is a great event that gives prospective kindergarten families the opportunity to meet kindergarten teachers, explore a classroom, ride a school bus, meet our community partners, and learn more about kindergarten in our district. This event will take place at Enbrook Elementary on October 30th, and families that prefer to attend a virtual event can do so 24/7, basically starting on the same day, October 30th, and we'll send they can do everything right there that everything that they need is right there in their comfort of their own home. So looking forward to that event. Our Osseo Senior High scholars jumped into action this month as Education Minnesota put a spotlight on the value of extracurricular activities and how those activities bring a well-rounded education. So the photos here just highlight some of the behind-the-scenes shots. There is a full video that will be airing at this year's Prep Bowl, so we're really proud of our Osseo Senior High Orioles. And as I mentioned earlier here at the beginning, in the area of lifelong learning, our again, staff had a fantastic time welcoming our students back in person and virtually in our classrooms on Wednesday, September 8th. Feels like a long time ago already. You really could feel the energy and excitement as students prepared for the new school year. And again, I just want to extend a thank you to our scholars, families, and community for a strong start and really starting on a high note. In the area of contributing to community, over 250 members of the Dolphin community attended Garden City Elementary School's Community Resource Fair last week. This annual free event aims to build community at the start of the school year while providing families with an opportunity to learn more about the many resources available in Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park. In the area of mission-driven employees, speaking of starting off the school year in the right way, we've all heard that school bus companies across the country have faced challenges in finding bus drivers to join their teams, and I'm just so proud of our efforts to ensure all of our routes are happening, and our transportation department has been exceptional as we started the year, working around the clock to keep our bus routes staffed and getting our students to and from school on time and safely. Last week, our students practiced on how to safely board, ride on, and exit and evacuate a bus as part of School Bus Safety Week, which ran from September 20th to the 24th. Here's some photos from Elm Creek Elementary taking a spin in the driver's seat. Now the bus is in park, so don't get worried. So we really are proud of those efforts during School Bus Safety Week. Staff musicians at Zanewood Community Esteem School, led by music teacher Michael Bissonette, performed a rhythm of from the Yoruba people of Nigeria called Odunde Odunde for families on the first day of school. This welcome rhythm is roughly translated to, "The new year is here, we're happy and thankful." Each staff musician learned the rhythm to create excitement for the first day of school and honor our scholars' cultures. If you'd like to see some video footage of the performance, you can find it on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Thank you to the staff who helped our families feel very welcome at the first day of school. And finally, tonight, as part of my superintendent update, I'll give you a brief update on our COVID-19 preparedness plan, some updates since our last board meeting in August. And as I shared last month, our commitment is to continue to provide a safe and healthy learning environment for our students, staff, and community members and our visitors in our buildings. And right now, that focus is on mitigating the transmission potential in our schools and communities, and really to try to stay in our in-person learning model and continue to minimize the spread of the virus and actually other illnesses right now. We're seeing lots of other illnesses, seasonal things as well, really starting to take hold too. So I'm really trying to make sure we're trying to keep everyone healthy and safe. Our COVID district response team has been providing support across the district. We've worked to finalize every plan for each of our sites. Each site has a COVID-19 coordinator, and they've all went through our refresher and new training to administer and work their safety plans. The team has also been working to purchase and procure more than enough disposable and cloth face masks for our students and staff, and each site has an inventory to support their building. Members of the district COVID team are also out visiting and just monitoring those plans, providing support, answering questions, and really making sure that we're doing the best job we possibly can. Some updated information for the board. We try to keep you updated weekly, if not multiple times a week, on kind of how things are moving forward. Right now, the CDC Hennepin County 7-day rate is at 186.44 per 100,000. So again, anything over 100 is in that high category. So right now, the state is basically in that full red. Almost every county, if not every county now, is in that red category. So we're continuing to follow those CDC recommendations. And on our next slide here, a little bit narrowing in on our district. These are the zip codes within our public school district in our ISD 279. So our district rate is a little higher than that, 227. So it's really kind of been a deceleration. We've leveled off a bit. There's still some increase, but not at the kind of same rate we were seeing across the county about a month ago. So again, we're still well over that 100 threshold. On the next slide here, this just gives a sense for the newly reported cases. Again, that the county is still in that high transmission category. And again, just to stress that the good news is that growth is slowing down a bit across the county, which we are really watching closely as school was coming into session across the county and across the state. This next slide here just kind of highlights the local cities. Now this is the 14-day case rate, so it's a little bit different model. I highlighted the numbers in yellow, and what you would see here is just a very small incremental increase from last week's numbers. So again, a bit of a leveling off, which is hopefully a good sign to come. This slide here, I just want to update you on the case rate percentages for our school-aged students. So there was a bit of an increase here, not surprising with school being in session now. We went from 22.6% of all cases, COVID cases, being of children up to 25.1, so about a 2.5% increase, and a little bit of a bump in the 0 to 9 age range that was pointed out from Hennepin County Public Health when we met with them this past week. So there's still concerns about the number of cases reported in child care and school settings, and the pediatric cases have increased by about 50% the last couple of weeks. So we're just watching those things very closely. This next slide, just the red gives you a sense for the positivity rates that we're seeing in those age bands, and anything over 5% is the concern threshold for the county. So we're still in that area above 5% and watching closely, paying close attention to positivity rates and transmission situations. More closely to our district here, this is from September 21st to the 27th, so this past week. We've had 68 cases total, positive COVID cases. 60 of those, or just about 90%, being with students, and the remaining cases with staff. When we look at positive cases year to date since school started, you can see here that we've had 159 positive student cases and 23 staff cases in the 3 weeks that we've been in session. Really what we're seeing mostly though is, in addition to the positive cases, just a lot of illness happening. I think, I know even in my own household, I had my own kids, I'm kind of coming down with some things. So this past week alone, 400, almost 500 symptomatic cases of students, and that's really been putting a strain on our health offices. So we're taking some action to support our health offices. So almost 92% of those symptomatic cases are with our students. And if you look back to the beginning of the year on the next slide, nearly 1,000 symptomatic cases, but half of those have been in the last week. So we're just seeing a high uptick in just general illness on top of the COVID positive cases that we're having. So on this next slide, I need to take the opportunity just to remind our families and our staff and our students, it's really important for us to stay open and stay safe when you're not feeling well or feeling sick, that staying home is the best action we can take, because it is really creating a lot of challenges for us in our health offices. So it really does help when everyone does their part. Our testing program on the next slide, we are beginning to look at longer term, but in the short term, we're offering families who don't have access to testing. We're fortunate to have a location right here in Brooklyn Park that's really close for the community to take advantage of. But in addition to that, if needed, a symptomatic student can take home a Vault PCR test. And then with the parents' permission, the students would be able to take that PCR test at home, online via Zoom, which is required by Vault. And then upon completion, families can bring those completed tests back to school if they would like, and we will turn that test into Vault. And again, just want to emphasize that testing site at Brooklyn Park. It's at the Starlight Center at 8085 Brooklyn Boulevard. We continue to look at our decision-making framework as we monitor things here, looking at all the data and key indicators that we are watching closely. We continue to have weekly consultation, and sometimes more than weekly consultation, with our regional support team, which includes the epidemiology team from Hennepin County Public Health, MDH and MDE when necessary, and continue to just monitor that closely and use that information to determine if there's a time for any new recommendations to bring to you as the board for some decision-making. As I shared last time on the next slide, we didn't put in place this decision guide when it came to the masking mitigation strategy, along with the many other mitigation efforts that are part of our response plan. That's all available on the website. We're still in that red category at this point, as I shared earlier, and continuing to not only use this guide here for district-level decisions, but some school-level decisions. If we see some smaller either outbreaks or situations within a classroom or within a building, then we can look at those specific data to those situations. And at this time, there hasn't really been a big change in the case rates, so right at this point, I'm not recommending any changes. As we watch the state, the county, the city, and our school-level data, we've seen the increases in illness in school in our cases, but we're still, I think, doing a really good job mitigating that and being able to continue with in-person learning. So we're just monitoring that as you've seen in some of my updates, on almost a daily basis with that data. So with that in mind, I want to say it one more time. I know I sound like a broken record, but I really appreciate and want to say thank you to our scholars, their parents, caregivers, our visitors, and community members to work together to continue to keep us as safe as possible, because we just see it. I see it in the classrooms. I've been to every school the first few days, and the energy and the excitement and the connectedness that's happening, we just know that's the best learning for our scholars. So that's where we want to stay. I know some of these things are inconvenient, but it is the best learning environment that we can provide, and trying to keep everyone safe and healthy, especially as we begin to enter into that flu season and other just seasonal illnesses that continue to maybe add on to some of the other challenges we've faced over the last year and a half. So with that in mind, I'll just pause here. Chair Dawson-Walton, give it maybe an opportunity for any questions the board has. I've been trying to kind of keep you up to date each week or twice a week with the information, and wanted to share that with the community tonight. So any comments or questions, I
Anybody have any
welcome.
comments or questions? Yes.
Superintendent, so thank you for the information and all of the time I know you have been spending on this once again. One of the, I think it was 2 slides ago, it's the chart that shows the 4 different scenarios with the recommendations at the bottom associated with each one. So I noticed, actually the last time you presented this, it was the exact same chart, yet you're coming forth with no recommendation to make masks recommended instead of required. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about updating the chart so it's more reflective of your decision-making process, because right now there seems to be a disconnect between the chart that you showed and the fact that you don't have a recommendation to.
So to clarify, the chart reflects anything over 100 in high transmission. I think we're talking about the same chart here, right?
I am,
That
that
there.
one, yep.
Yep. So I wouldn't come to you with a recommendation until those CDC numbers, that's right now at 186, falls below 50. So anything from 50 to 100, it would be a substantial. And if you see at the bottom, substantial and high, right now, the recommendation would be we continue to require masks. So until we get to that yellow category where we see case rates in our county and our local, we're using that CDC number, and that's per the recommendation of MDH. So we've kind of been well over that 100 mark for about a month, and that really hasn't prompted me to want to come back with any new recommendations yet, knowing that the masking is pretty critical for our ability to stay safe and be in person. I don't know if that helps, Director Brooks?
It doesn't, and I may need to follow up with you separately. I think I might be basing this off of the wrong information. I think it's the chart that it's updated on social media, and I think you send it out as well.
County
It has our
data?
county,
Yeah,
and
we're
I
not
think it has
using-
the highest at like 40, and so I think that's what I've been basing this off of.
Yeah, just to
Is that-
clarify, we're not using the county data for any decision-making other than just to be able to track our local communities. But this chart's based on the CDC per 100,000 number, and that's what's been recommended by the Minnesota Department of Health. So I include the county number because they're the only one that has some specific city-level data, but we're not using that 14-day case rate because this is a 7-day case rate. So I just include that so we get a little picture of what's going on in our communities within our districts in so many different communities. So hopefully that clarifies.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit confusing because on the chart, it says district level in that row. And then it also says county, 7-day case rate. And so I think that's where a little bit of the confusion is coming from because in my opinion, I think we should be using our local specific community data versus the CDC's information. And could you clarify why we wouldn't use the information? Why would the Minnesota Department of Health not want us to use the information that they're giving us?
Yeah, this is so to clarify, the district level decision on, this is around masking, right? Is the CDC number is a county 7-day case rate. It's more recent, the county numbers that Hennepin County collects is a 14-day lag, so it's 2 weeks old every time we get it. This data is updated more regularly, so we can use it in more real time. And the county recommends using the CDC case rate data because it's a 7-day case rate per 100,000 instead of the county numbers that are a lag by 2 weeks. So that's the primary rationale. But it's still a county case rate data. And the previous chart that you're alluding to was what was used for learning model decisions. And that's why I think where people are kind of remembering that from last year so much. They got really comfortable and used to those numbers because we were using those to make learning model decisions. And right now, this is how to use a different set of metrics for the masking decision and any other of the mitigation efforts. So we've been following the MDH recommendations to use the CDC number, which is a county number, but it's more regularly updated and is what's recommended to be used.
I think I'm just missing, like you mentioned the 7-day versus the 14-day. I think I'm missing how we're jumping from 40 to over 100. Like that's one thing that I'm missing. And then second, just more information as to why we're not using the county data versus the CDC data. I mean, are we saying that the county data is inaccurate because of that 14-day window? Like what, I'm just missing a lot of what's happening behind the scenes.
Again, the primary reason is it's a 14-day looking back. It's a longer delay, and it's a per 10,000 number instead of the per 100,000 number. And even the county and MDH recommend using the more because it's more real time per 100,000 in our county. And the CDC has this ability to give us kind of this low, moderate, substantial, and high categorization of the data, where the 14-day case rate, there is no decision table for those data. And I don't feel like it's my job to create that as a superintendent. That's a public health expertise area. So that, I think, is another reason why the MDH is using the CDC calculations, which are basically real time. You can look them up daily instead of waiting for a once a week updates of data that's 2 weeks old.
Thank you. I'm good with the recommendation. I just needed more information as to how you got to the recommendation. And I had the same questions last time, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Do you have any follow-up before we move on? Because I know Tamara.
I do have a couple more questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
So one of my questions is the difference between the district level and the school level. I've had several questions, people being afraid that their school's going to get shut down. And I see in the high transmission column, it says 3 or more people in the same elementary classroom. And I know this is for masking, but what people are worried about is that an entire class will be sent home or quarantined, or an entire building will. Can you just elaborate on this 5% or greater transmission rate and how that impacts classes and schools?
Thank you for asking that question. I've had a lot of the same questions, so I appreciate you asking. The 5% or above, we look at across a school, just illness in general. It's a threshold we used to use for the flu. It's a public health guideline for just overall illness if you have that many students and staff in a school who are sick. Why is that? So when we hit a 5% threshold, we start talking with public health about why is that. We've had some times, and it's a guide, so it's not an absolute. So it really depends on a number of variables. So our process is when we get to that number, we have a conference with public health and we look into what is the makeup of that situation. Do we think it's COVID cases? Is it other illnesses? And we've felt confident in operating, staying in person, at times even when we've been slightly above that 5%. When we see, for example, with COVID cases, if we get to 3 students in a classroom, we also look at how big is the class. So is it 15 students, 20 students, 25 students, 30 students? That makes a difference. And we start that conversation if we see 3 in a class because we start worrying about transmission within a classroom. We have had one classroom this year where we've had to do quarantine for 10 days because there was an outbreak that was more than 3, and we had to make that change. But so far, that's the only time. So we've been really fortunate. And again, our goal is to stay in person. I could see a scenario where we may have 1 or more classrooms within a school, and we're still staying in person because we can contain and mitigate that situation within a classroom pod. But it really depends on what do we know about that situation. And those are the guidelines that we work with as far as making those decisions. So these are kind of some starting points for conversation on do we need to take further action, or do we feel like we can safely continue knowing that we want to stay in person. You know, we really don't want to move an entire school to a distance or remote learning kind of situation if we can avoid that.
Thank you. Just to follow up, in the response that you just gave me, you had said, or other illnesses, but this is specifically related to COVID positive cases. So we may see a class that may have other illness that could potentially quarantine. Would we also then, if we have other illnesses like influenza or strep throat or something like that going around, that is at that 5% threshold, are we talking about continuing this model, or is this specific to COVID?
We look at both. Right now, we're in a position where we need to look at what are our, like I shared earlier, how many COVID cases are we seeing, and how many symptomatic cases are we seeing? That really is an indicator of how much other illness might be happening in a school, and we can even drill that down to like a classroom level. So we look at both of those. The 5% is really a starting point, or if we like see 3 positive COVID cases within a classroom, which, you know, if that's, I'll use if there's 20 students in a classroom, that gets us talking about is what do we know about those 3 cases, and with where that might occur, is there any transmission evidence in the classroom, and seeing if there's any other students who may be out symptomatic waiting for testing. There's lots of those variables that come into play in the conversation with public health.
So I think I didn't word my question correctly. So I guess what I'm asking is, there's a fear that we're going to be in masks forever. People have that fear. And so what I'm asking is, if we see a 5% threshold or greater of any illness, which we've never done this type of mitigation strategies for, is that what this is intended for, or is this intended for COVID-specific illness?
This has been primarily for COVID-specific illness. And we start with the district numbers first. So that per 100,000 case rate data is where we start. The school level piece really comes into play. You know, if we found ourselves in a situation where we're under 50 and we've been able to relax the masking requirement, but then we see an outbreak in a classroom, and we may have to do something for that classroom or even that school, while the rest of the district doesn't need to have a mask requirement, for example's sake, if those district-wide numbers get us to that point. So we start with the higher of the 2, and right now the county 7-day case rate's it's nearly double the threshold of 100, right? So it's been over 200, it's now at 186. So we start there. And then if we were in the green or the yellow as a district, but we saw something happen within a classroom or a school, we have the ability to make some decisions with that school level matrix.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
It's a good question. These are, getting a lot of these same questions, so I appreciate you asking. Helps to clarify.
All right, Director Grady.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the entire administration and the COVID team for throwing this all together while the entire country is trying to figure out, world is trying to figure out how to move through a pandemic. It adds an extra stress to the system, and I just really appreciate everybody who's working really hard to keep our kids healthy and safe. Just as a reminder, please, everybody wear your mask properly over your nose. Make sure your kids are healthy before sending them to school. And finally, vaccines and flu shots protect us all from circulating viruses. So my question for you, Superintendent McIntyre, is can you remind us of what resources are available to families for vaccinations?
We are relying on our local community vaccine options, vaccine clinics, and/or, the other options, either through your medical provider or, and we know that some of the local, like Walgreens and CVS's also provide those. So those are the options. We have inquired about some vaccine clinics, and to start the year, the recommendation was to lean on those community resources, to not stress. There's a bit of a finite piece to that, so they really recommended just steering our communities towards those existing vaccine or testing sites as well. We have a very robust testing site. We're fortunate to have that here in Brooklyn Park. So other than if requested, we have those vault test kits as well. So for now, we've just been partnering with our communities and our county partners to steer folks towards those vaccine opportunities. As it stands right now, we'll see what the next few weeks bring, if anything changes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. So back to the chart. So if I look at the actual positive cases in our district, 50 students out of 20,000 is 2.5%. So 50 students have positive COVID case rates. Now the dates in here 21 to 24, so not a full 7 days, but that's 2.5%. And I think I heard you right in saying that the priority is the county cases, not our actual school data of what's happening in our schools for decisions affecting children in our schools, because the county data is also not specific to age group. That's the continuation. Our focus will be on the county case rate, I think is what I heard you say. Is that correct?
So I didn't quite hear you that last part because what the noise in the background.
So the county data is not demographic specific, and I think I heard you say that that's our starting point, and then we look at the in-school data secondarily. However, our in-school data, 50 cases over 20,000 students is 2.5%, which would put us in a different place if we were looking at our actual district level data.
Yeah, this chart is predicated on the county data at first, the 7-day case rates first, yep.
So if we continue to see a trend where our actual student level data is quite different than county level, would we consider a change to what data we prioritize?
We always considering that, but the reality is right now is as the county level data has leveled off, our student data has doubled each week. So our symptomatic and our case rate data has increased. So what we're wondering is, will that begin to show up differently in some of that county level data? And as we drill all the way down to like a classroom level, if it's, if we get a handful of cases in a specific classroom, that's problematic, right? Even though we may not, we've had schools that have very few cases, but the ones they have are in the same
Right.
classroom. So we have to take action, right?
Right.
Versus more cases, but not concentrated.
Right,
So there's different scenarios or circumstances that kind of play into it.
right. And then the symptomatic cases, do we have any data previous to COVID to be able to truly understand the context of that number? Because like you said, there's been a significant spike of cases that are not COVID but would be considered symptomatic because of the symptoms are consistent with flu and cold and other illnesses that kids haven't experienced for nearly 2 years. So do we have a larger context to interpret that?
Yeah, we've been asking those same questions, try to get that same kind of context. What we're hearing is, we're seeing, last year there was virtually no flu season because we were all at home, right? We just didn't see it. And we are also hearing more about RSV and some other illnesses that are happening at a higher rate. So we're trying to do exactly what you're suggesting and get a little clearer sense for what's the relationship of that and what's our COVID, case rates looking like. Because what's really hard about it is a lot of the symptoms are very similar. And it's been hard on our health offices to really manage that early on. Although I would say they're doing a great job. It's really tough, but it has, we're doing everything we can to, be at school and keep as many students at school as safely as possible. And I would say our success rate, to me, feels very good compared to what I've been hearing from my colleagues around the metro. We've not had the same level of classroom quarantines, for example, that some of the other districts our size have experienced. So I think we're, as challenging as it's been, we're doing a good job, and that's resulting in students being at school as much as possible.
Okay, thanks, that's helpful.
I have one follow-up, if that's okay. Could we look at our absence data from previous start of year or,
Yeah, we think we have it pre-COVID, like last year.
yeah,
So we're trying to get a sense for, can we make those direct comparisons? We're working with MDH too as well with, the county is developing a system for reporting to us the number of cases and vaccine rates for students and staff. And I like that they're doing that so we don't have to put more resources of the district into trying to find that information. So we're in the process of trying to look at, Heather, to your point, how does this compare to previous years when it comes to just other symptomatic kind of cases, right? And we're in the middle trying to see if we can get that historical data right now, so.
I have one last question. For symptomatic, I'm assuming that means any cold or flu-like symptom, the regular COVID list that they ask you every time you walk into somewhere, right? If someone ends up testing negative for COVID, then are they removed out of that symptomatic, or do they stay in that category?
Troy's in the room. Maybe you can step up. I don't want to get this one wrong. We'll rely on my expert team here.
Great question. If they're symptomatic and they're flagged, if they go and get a negative test, it is adjusted and the flag's removed, and then it's removed from the overall stat that you're seeing tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have anything? All right. Quick question, what's the turnaround time, do you know, for the take-home test at Vault?
For results, well, we say within 24 hours, but we've seen it under 12. So it's very quick, but I think what we've been asked to say, it's within 24 hours, but most of the time, Troy, give me a head nod, it's been half that, it's been within 12 or less.
Okay.
Is that fair? Am I being accurate with that?
Yeah, you were asking about the in-home test?
Yeah, well, yeah, when you
The
said that.
PCR take-home
Yeah.
test? It all, when you take the PCR home test, it's got to be returned to the school and then it's shipped off to the testing site.
Okay.
So that could take 48 to 72 hours, depending on the time. The actual testing clinic, it's less than 12 hours right now. I know that for somebody that's tested in the last 12 hours, that's how quick it was for turnaround.
Okay, thank you. I mean, because I do think that, it's a good conversation considering, our resolution is, there is a, for first try, and so we'll kind of keep reevaluating that chart that you have. And I do think it can be confusing when you're looking at the data, it's just what numbers we're looking at. So I just looked at our website, and there is a link to MDH, but even, I've also seen the Hennepin County 14-day trends for per 10,000 kind of going around. I think people are looking at that number. So I think that's a good conversation we had. So thank you so much. And our next agenda item is school board committee reports. I'll start with Director Grady.
I have one. I had a Northwest Suburban Business meeting on Wednesday, September 15th, and where we approved the 2021-2022 strategic action plan.
Right. Thank you. Director Brooks.
So I am light on committee updates because the RISE committee and DPAC should hopefully be ramping up soon now that school is back in session. But I do want to provide a quick update on Brooklyn Bridge Alliance for Youth. And so essentially the board is going through some structural sort of changes, more so clarification. So And the last meeting essentially clarified the various roles that exist in the organization, sort of the major stakeholders. One of the big changes sort of being discussed right now is let me find it, is voting power of the college presidents who have been active members of the board but haven't had the ability to vote. So that is sort of a change that we are discussing, as well as the ability for youth directors to also have voting power. So that is something under discussion as we figure out how that is sort of going to work based on the cities that are involved in Brooklyn Bridge and the growth that may come in the future. And then the other thing that I think is particularly relevant to what we're doing is the Youth on Board initiative. So they have 14 tables potentially lined up. They're looking for 40 youth leaders for those boards. And so I know that we are hopefully going to be a big chunk of that with our youth directors that are coming. I think that is the biggest, those are the three biggest that I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Director Mosqueda-Jones.
I just have the 287 report. We have had 2 meetings since our last 279 board meeting. We're still collecting feedback for the superintendent profile. We had a work session on race, the power of illusion. We watched episode 3 of that and then had deliberative dialogues between the board and staff of 287, which was very enlightening. And then 2 more things. North Star Online, which is 287's online school, is doing a lot of collaboration with districts. Not so much 279 since we have our 279 online, but they've been doing a lot of collaboration with other districts. And then they're going on some bus tours for board members, but also board members can take other administration along with them to visit some of their sites. That's all I have.
All right. Director Simons.
So ECMAC had a meeting, neither Director Mosqueda-Jones nor myself were able to attend, but it was an onboarding meeting, the first of the meeting kind of with the newest members, and covered a lot of the foundational items of that committee, so including the kind of history of ECMAC, how ECMAC makes decision, and then our Building a Better Future process, which is ongoing and continues. So as an onboarding event and meeting, and our next meeting is scheduled for October 18th.
Thank you. Director Douglas.
I do not have any reports. Our next kayak or curriculum instruction committee will be meeting actually next week. So that's why I don't have any reports this week. I just wanted to ask a couple clarifying questions. Director Grady, could you share with us more about the strategic plan? And that, like, in an email, so we have a better idea of what's going on with the Northwest Suburban Group? And then Director Mosqueda-Jones, you were talking about the bus ride-on thing. Have you participated in any of those yet?
They haven't quite started. They're starting in October.
Okay.
I will not be able to because it's during my teaching day.
Well, that's what I was getting at, is so when I was previously on that board, it's actually open to all of our board members.
Yes.
If anybody's available to go. So if you could share that with the rest of the board, and maybe one of us can go.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just have the, well, Thomas talked about RISE committee, where they're just getting, looking at the mission and kind of the direction of that committee, so that's exciting. And then the AMSD, Association for Metropolitan School Districts, we're in the throes of a legislative platform, so collecting different member districts, legislative platforms, what we can all collectively advocate for, so that will continue to be finalized over the next couple months. Then their AMSD, along with other sister educational organizations, issued a joint statement of increasing educational equity so that, you know, we as Minnesota can really compete in our global economy. And we know that it's tied to that each and every one of our students have equitable educational outcomes. So it's really exciting. It's a big feat for all these organizations to come together in one joint statement. So that was really neat to see. It seems like it's been forever since I think we've had 2 AMSD meetings, but the other exciting thing on Friday, or on 2 days, we're having one of the first student panels at AMSD, and we have one of our very own scholars from Osseo High School participating, and so the topic is around how they've navigated the pandemic over the last 18 months. You know, what went well, what were some of the challenges, what issues are important to them, and what they themselves would like AMSD to advocate for. And so I think that's going to be really neat. I know a lot, we're talking about mental health and school calendar changes, and so they'll have a chance to talk and ask questions. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's all I have, and now I will hand it over to our first presentation of the evening, the Family and Community Engagement Update. Superintendent of Equity and Achievement, Michael Lehan, will introduce our presenters.
I was going to say I miss those days where somebody would come in, like wipe the microphone down and all that, but I really don't miss those days. Good evening, community, viewing community, scholars, board members, Superintendent McIntyre. It is great. I'm really excited to stand before you with my FACE team this evening. And first I want to pause and just celebrate each of you board members. It wasn't that long ago that we spent some time doing interviews, Brian and I, for those of you that were on the board at that time, asking about what's your vision for family and community engagement? What does that look like? And more recently, we've had the opportunity to talk to Grady and Thomas and understand what their vision, what their hope is. And now we stand before you this evening with the FACE team not even being a year old. And they have the opportunity to really share the work that's been done this last year, almost year, through the FACE department. And moreover, you're going to see some really great alignment between the work that they've done over the summer and some of our strategic directions. So there's already inherent alignment based on some of the vision that each of you had come into fruition. I also want to celebrate Patrick Smith and Brian Severson Hall, as they were the ones years ago that really started this. And so as we stand before you tonight, it is a collective effort on all of us, and really excited to present to you the FACE team and the work they've done. At this time, I invite Vanessa Gill, the coordinator of FACE, to the podium.
Good evening, board members and the community, and Superintendent McIntyre. I'm Vanessa Gill, the Family and Community Engagement Coordinator, and we're excited to share updates with you. I do have part of the team with me today, Luann Bowie and Kavan Whitlock. And so tonight, the outcomes of this presentation, you all will have the opportunity to hear about our highlights that we have thus far from our work, and then understanding our school improvement plan, the collaboration with our sites, as well as an introduction to our family engagement rubric that we're working on, and then learning about our 3-year department plan. And so as I shared, I do have our first highlight, I do have the FACE team here with me. And so I'm the coordinator, as I shared, and then Amber Wright, she's our ASP supporting our department. And Kavan Whitlock, she's our equity specialist on the team. And Luann Bowie, she's our newest addition, community liaison, serving with our department. So now I'm going to hand it over to Kavan, and she'll share some highlights from our summer activities.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Vanessa. So we all know over this last summer, the big focus was on that learning loss that our scholars faced due to COVID. So as the FACE team, we really wanted to offer some summer engagement experiences that really focused on the whole scholar, their well-being, for not just the scholars, but also their families as well. And so with this experience, with the summer experience that we offered, scholars were able to enroll in advance. They also were able to enroll day of and even just show up to the events. And so this just allowed that flexibility and short-term commitment for all of our scholars and families. And so as the scholars had participated in these experiences, they even got to explore what other options we had to offer throughout the rest of the summer. We did serve and engage a number of our scholars across the district during COVID during this past summer. And a few other engagement experiences I just want to briefly mention that aren't highlighted this evening. We offered a yoga series, we offered a bucket drumming, and then there was also a theater camp as well. What you see shown here in the pictures, we offered an art workshop. And in those pictures, those are collaborative pieces that our scholars did, and that is currently on display at Brooklyn Center City Hall. Some feedback that we had gotten regarding this art workshop, where scholars got to just explore and get that exposure to different styles of art. And then they were able just to express, how they felt through art as well. The next engagement experience that we offered was a soccer camp. This was an athletic experience that was co-led by our very own Park Center senior high coaches, as well as our very own Park Center senior high soccer players as well. We got great feedback regarding this athletic experience, and one in particular was just that need for more athletic opportunities for our.
We're tapping into resources for sites as they identify some of their needs, and we've been in close collaboration and conversation with the equity department and the new equity coordinators to kind of ensure that we're all on the same page as we're supporting our sites as they identify new needs and resources that are necessary. We're also a critical thought partner, right? So we're joining our sites at these tables as they're strategizing about their SIP goals, as they're trying to come up with new initiatives to better partner and more intentionally partner with our families and caregivers. We are also co-creators with them, right? There's a lot of situations that I'll highlight on the next slide, just where we're sitting at that table and coming up with ideas. There's lots of things arising in conversation as we're back in the school building, as we're trying to navigate how do we be in community with our families, how do we do that safely and appropriately for our parents and caregivers. I think we have another slide. There we go. Whoops, nope. So I'll highlight next as we get these slides together. There's two of our three sites that I'll highlight some of the collaboration we've had with them. And first is Birch Grove. And we had the opportunity to sit in some conversation with Birch Grove as they identified how to get to their families as they were filling out their free and reduced lunch forms, right? There was a really low turnout for that, and we know that's a huge need for funding. And so we sat in some conversations to identify some ways to engage our scholars in that process, the teachers, as well as families and caregivers. And I think we might be at the right side now. And so in that process, they came up with their 4-step plan, right? And so teachers are sharing this plan with their scholars in the classroom, and they're identifying a challenge, right? How many scholars can we get to turn their forms in, and a way to do that, because we know there's privacy issues, and we know the way to do that is to send home an extra form. And so they're sending home a form for families that have a QR code that takes them electronically right to that form, so they can fill that out, turn that slip in, and that scholar turns it in, and that's their ticket, right? For that classroom as a challenge to count the number of forms they have for each class. So there's a class challenge, but then as a school-wide, what percentage can we get to? And I believe their goal is around 75%, right? And then there's some incentive for the classroom and the scholars as well as they participate in that. And so our next site I'll highlight is going to be Zanewood. And so we had opportunity last year to connect with Zanewood. And we've been in close conversation with their Title I lead who leads their engagement activities. And in there, they've actually established their PTO. But the way they've switched it is rather than focusing on fundraising and things like that, like a traditional PTO, their PTO is focused on engaging with more parents, building that relationships with parents in the schools and teachers, but then also providing that information to parents so they can be a partner in their child's education, so they understand what's happening in the classrooms as well as the curriculum. And so the last site we'll highlight is Oakview, and so we've had the opportunity to sit down with administration at Oakview, and we're actually going to be joining them in another meeting as they create their SIP engagement goal, as they create that school improvement plan goal, their engagement focused. So we'll be able to sit with them as they think critically about how they're going to engage with all of the scholars and families in their community. And in addition to that, we are also co-piloting a location for the FACE team. So we don't have a home at the time, a specific location in the district at the moment. And so what we're piloting is, how do we identify the appropriate location for our work as staff in the district? How do we position ourselves strategically? But then how do we have a dual purpose space? How do we use that space as staff, but also have it available to our families and caregivers, and eventually the community as well? I have no clue what's going on with our slides. Here we go. So next, I will highlight measuring engagement. And so what was important to the FACE team is to really ensure we ground our work in research. And so what we had the opportunity to do was do some research on what different organizations and schools are using as they measure engagement. And so what I identified from the Lucille Packard Foundation for Children's Health, they use a framework for assessing family engagement and systems change. And so representation is the first domain. There we go. Representation is the first domain, and it's reflecting diversity of the community, partnering with families. And transparency is providing access to relevant knowledge. Impact, identifying what has changed or what is being done differently based on family involvement. And then commitment, promoting engagement at its core and establishing engagement as in all systems, in all levels of the system. And so next I will highlight, this is really not working, but so our next slide is our school-wide engagement rubric that is used from the Flamboyant Foundation. And they have 3 stages. And that first stage is focused on that welcoming, engaging climate. And it really focuses on valuing the families as partners in their scholars' education and establishing strong, mutual, respectful relationships with staff and their families. And then creating a respectful, inclusive school community so families feel connected to not only the staff in the building, but also the other families in the community. And so stage 2 is focused on programming and finding ways to have school programming and family engagement where scholars are at the center and their learning is the center of that focus. And then we also have schools providing information and guidance about their family improvement plans, how they're working to regularly monitor their scholar success. I'm sorry, schools providing information and guidance for families to effectively and regularly monitor their scholar success. And then stage 3 focuses on how the school informs families on the state of school and improvement initiatives. So and it invites families for feedback. So there's some feedback loops in there. And then schools ensuring that family participate in the collective strategic planning for the school's improvement. And these are those 3 stages. And so next, what I wanted to do is take a focus. So we had these 2 examples, but I also wanted to highlight our focus as a district. And so I wanted to highlight the core values that you all are in the process of approving in the strategic plan. And so starting with belonging, really, because we know, first I'll say our core values, they're drivers of our words and actions. And so with belonging is developing meaningful relationships that build trust, understanding, and community. Inclusion, intentionally engaging scholars, diverse voices and perspectives equitably and respectfully. And then intrinsic value, each scholar, staff member, and family is valued and respected for their perspective, experience, and contributions. And so on the next slide is our strategic directions. And so again, there's that creating that safe, welcoming, and inclusive learning environment, right? So ensuring that our families feel welcome in all spaces in our district, in all buildings, and then promoting that inclusive participation and providing timely, relevant, and accessible communication. So ensuring that, one, we have participation from all of our families and all of our scholars. And then lastly, that we're creating systems of communication that are realistic, easily accessible, and convenient for the family. And so we've used this for the foundation for our engagement rubric. And so before I highlight the different components for that, it's important for me to share that this was a crafted and collective process. So the FACE team started working on this, but we also collaborated with our RISE ambassadors. So they were key stakeholders in creating this, as well as some principal feedback. And so our first component comes down to our beliefs, and this really comes from, we have these beliefs, and this is why we engage in family engagement. We believe every family should feel valued, seen, and heard in our district, and so that's why we engage in these practices. And they lead into our actions. So because of our beliefs, we're very intentional about the experiences we create, and we want to make sure every scholar is going to have a positive experience in our district. And then our actions, they really yield the results that create the conditions so we can live out our mission. So we are inspiring and preparing each and every scholar with confidence, courage, and competence to achieve their dreams, contribute to the community, and engage in a lifetime of learning. And so the fourth section for the engagement rubric will focus on our progress monitoring. And in here we have 4 focus areas, and the first is communication, really looking at how we're communicating with our families, how they're able to communicate with us. And we also have intentional collaborations, which is collaborating with our parents, right, our caregivers, and the community, but also, the community as well. And so the third focus areas are conditions for learning. So what is the climate and the culture of our school buildings and district as a whole? And lastly, we have empowerment and advocacy. How are we empowering our families to advocate and champion for their scholar, but then be successful navigating the system while they do that? And next, I will hand it over to Luann, and she will share a little bit of information for our engagement plan.
Thank you, Vanessa. I'm excited to join the FACE team for the past 2 months, and I would like to share with you some of the identified best practices. As Vanessa has stated, that we ground our work in research and learning before we implementing it. So we have found the identified best practices overall in a national context. Invite family to share priorities, concern, and feedback by creating a welcome environment, translation across the district, interpreter providers, childcare or transportation needed. Bring family into decision-making process, provide opportunity for family to sit on parent advisory council or specific council. Access on family engagement initiative through an equity lens by identify barriers why parents not coming. Take action and help them to take that barrier out. Offer flexibility and a variety of options for family involvement. Instead of in-person, can we offer virtual option? Leverage a variety of tools to facilitate meaningful and two-way communication. Let parents come to us and have option and have feedback instead of shove information about our district to them. And during that process, I also have some highlight that I would like to share with you through that data research about our neighboring district of what they do for enrollment plan. And Minneapolis Public School is one of the neighboring district that I pick with their 4 impact area for welcoming environments, partnering with families, training and development for staff, and integration of engagement strategy. And I also have another highlights for neighboring district is St. Paul Public School. Their teams are also similar with welcome environment, family partnerships, and teaching and learning and community partnership. And I would like to go back to Vanessa to tell you more of what's the focus for our 3-year department team based on the research that we found.
Thank you, Luann. So as she shared, we are grounding our work in research. And it's also important for us to recognize the broader scope of engagement practices and then highlighting those of our neighboring districts. But we also recognize how our district shows up differently in terms of engagement. So it's important for the FACE department to situate engagement in our own context. And so we have 3 focus areas that we're doing that, and I'll share some examples of things we've done thus far. And the first is inclusive participation. And so we did launch our RISE committee earlier in the spring this year, and we've had the opportunity to co-create alongside our parents and caregivers, and so really model that for our sites and what that looks like, as well as creating intentional foundational feedback loops that engage a cross-section of our families. And then our next section is our partnership impact, and that really focuses on establishing very strategic partnerships and support our families. And so a few examples of that is this past, I believe it was in June, we hosted the vaccine clinic at 2 of our sites, at Park Center and Maple Grove Middle. And so we were in partnership with Hennepin County to do that, to ensure that families had the opportunity to be vaccinated, especially when that became available for 12 years old and up. In addition to that, we have some great community partnerships and collaborations that are rolling, and Brooklyn Bridge Alliance for Youth is one of those. We've been in close conversations and community with them, as well as we've identified some inter-district connections points. And so we've had some connection points with Fridley and District 287. And so lastly, I'll just speak to our social soil. And one of the things we've realized is we have to be very intentional about identifying the appropriate location to plant the FACE team, right? A place where we can be strategically positioned and position ourselves for the greatest impact. And so the FACE pilot location, which we highlighted earlier, it's important that, one, we kind of shift from that mental model of having a district team be at the district site, right? How do we get closer, in close proximity to our families and caregivers? And so we realize that some of the mental models that would assume we should be here in this district office, they really limit access to most of our deserving families. And so as we identify what location puts us in close, proximal, and accessible, make us most accessible to our families in the community, that's one of the things that we're doing alongside right now with Oakview Elementary. And I truly believe as we do this, we'll begin to create that relational capital across the district with all of our families and all of our communities, which will really be critical for our success. And so lastly, I will highlight our 3-year department plan. Hopefully it shows up on here. There we go. And so you heard earlier, there's a lot of districts, they kind of model engagement and plan it out a bit differently. And so we focused on that 3-year plan. And so what you'll see here is this year, this is our year 1. We have our RISE committee and our summer of wellness, and then our engagement rubric that we're working on, as well as that FACE pilot location. These are a lot of our learning and implementation works initiatives that were taking place right now. And then in year 2, we'll be able to focus on how do we establish that home base, right, for the FACE department, and what does that look like? Where is that positioned across the district, or positioned in the district? And as well as establishing some of those community partnerships, right? How do we identify new pathways to collectively serve our families alongside our partners? And then providing opportunities for parents and caregivers and enrichment activities. And so there's some standard works initiatives in there, but also some more learning and implementation taking place in year 2. And then year 3 would be impact monitoring. And so this is really focused on how do we identify that continuous improvement? How do we monitor where we're at, what's successful, what do we need to shift in our practices? And it's also very important that as we do that impact monitoring, we're including our scholars and families in that process. And with that being said, I'll just highlight some of the big takeaways from this presentation, and hopefully you have a clear picture of our department's initiatives that we're currently working on, a deeper understanding of the department's collaborative support we're providing for our sites, as well as an overview of the engagement rubric, and then clarity on our 3-year department plan. With that, I will open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you so much. I will open it up to anybody. Any questions or comments? Maybe I'll start with Director Grady.
Okay. I just want to say thank you for a beautiful presentation and your thoughtful and creative work in building on evidence-based research in order to do the most human of all things is really reach our families in the way that they need. So, and I also appreciate Michael Lehan, all the connections with the strategic plan and the values we've been talking about, representation, transparency, impact, and commitment, as well as belonging, inclusion, and the intrinsic value of each student. And I really love how you worked all of that through your plan, and you already are showing us results. So thank you very much to each and every one of you.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks.
I also want to say thank you for all of the work that you've been doing. I've been excited about this team since I first learned about it and first had an opportunity to meet you. And, you know, also, and hopefully much more coming in the fall or this fall, but we'll get an opportunity to work even more so with you through the RISE committee. I did have a couple of questions. One of them, so one of the, I think the common critiques that we get as a district and often directly, you know, to the board is our lack of engagement with the community. And I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little more about how we're looking to measure our progress in that area through the larger community.
So I think one of the ways we'll have to do that is, one, just identify more or clearly identify who our partners are and what are those works and initiatives we're collaborating on. I think there's a lot happening, and I think it's happening in a lot of different areas of the district, and not everyone knows what's taking place. So there's a lot of work we're doing, one, with the community partners that we know are existing, but also establishing new partners. But then that internal work, I think collaborating with other departments to identify who are we working with, what are those initiatives, and then looking for ways to find that collaboration. And so I think a lot of that initially is going to be learning what's here, what are we doing, and then looking at how do we collaboratively, what makes most sense to then identify and measure the impact we're making alongside them.
So am I correct, based on your 3-year department plan, that we are looking at 2023, 2024 before we have sort of real measurement in this area? It says impact monitoring under 23 to
Yeah.
24.
So we are monitoring. I would say those would be more of the larger monitoring systems. I think we're gathering a lot of data now. I think engagement, we also are looking at those, that qualitative data rather than quantitative. And so I think it looks a little different as we've heavily focused on quantitative data. So I would say the larger, more concrete system of measurement would then be solidified by that time. But along the way, we are gathering data as we're doing work. Yes. Okay, sure.
Sorry. And then I would just also offer that with our strategic plan, we obviously have those vision cards as well. So part of those vision cards, we're going to define some principles, ways of being principles that we'd want to see evident in the site improvement plan, in the site goals, in the vision cards at the site. So there's going to be that continuous loop that's naturally going to happen. And as Vanessa just alluded to, the progress monitoring, what sort of partnerships are serving us well? What partnerships do we need to potentially sunset? And then as we think about, that will be the year that likely will be a referendum, some of those things. Do we need to reconsider or re-envision where we want to go and how the FACE department aligns to that brighter tomorrow?
Thank you. So the second question, so I have attended a number of community events in Brooklyn Park, and so much of it has been focused on violence prevention and intervention of our older youth. And a lot of these meetings oftentimes come back to the school district and our lack of engagement, lack of partnership, lack of presence with those particular youth in parts of Brooklyn Park. And so I wanted to ask if we've thought about how we're going to engage families of older youth in Brooklyn Park, and and you already talked about community partnerships, but if we are looking at being at the table with some of these other community organizations that are working to address some of the issues that we're experiencing with those older youth, many of which are our scholars or should be our scholars. And so, yeah, just wondering what we're doing in that particular area. I know that what you presented today was just the highlights and a lot of the good stuff, but a lot of it seemed to be focused on sort of younger kids and even some of our middle schoolers, but we really need to focus on that 15 to 20 age range, and I haven't had a whole lot to contribute in that area. I know that we're working on it and things are ramping up, but just wanted to know if you are actually having those discussions and are looking to get to the table in Brooklyn Park.
Yeah, we are, and we actually have had several conversations with staff from Brooklyn Bridge Alliance about that. And I know we've had the opportunity to actually, this summer we partnered with Brooklyn Internship. So we had some older scholars actually working with us in the FACE department for some of our initiatives. And we're also having conversations with them regarding the, I believe it's like Youth on Boards, that initiative, well, to kind of see how can the FACE department collaborate with the young people, and how do we support our sites with doing that work as well. So we are in those conversations, but I would agree that we do have a lot more work to do as well.
And are we also looking to partner with, the city of Brooklyn Park as well, or Brooklyn Center? I am a big fan of the Brooklyn Bridge Alliance and the Youth on Board initiative. And we've talked about this as well in Brooklyn Bridge Alliance, but a lot of those youth are youth that are more likely to be in leadership roles or be more engaged and all of those things. And we want to certainly use that knowledge and those skills, but it's the youth that maybe aren't as likely to go in that direction that I think we need to also focus on.
Yeah, and I believe we're in the process also of strengthening some of those connections. So we have some of those starting connection points, but that is one of our focus for us right now, is making sure we're having stronger relationships with them so we can understand those areas of collaboration.
Thank you. Those have been kind of burning questions, so I appreciate you answering them. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, as a licensed parent educator, I'm super jazzed. I want to say thank you for your presentation. I appreciate the qualitative data, particularly in focusing on the whole child. I have a few questions. I know that you've been meeting with schools, and you highlighted Birch Grove, Zanewood, and Oakview. Is there like a common need? Like if you were to like look through the qualitative data and go, this is the theme that pulls out, what would that be?
I would say one of the common themes we've heard is how do we reach our multilingual families and learners? That's a big theme that we've heard. I know language support, right? How do we do that more intentionally with our families and scholars? And I also, some of our sites that have the most, how do I say this correctly? That have more diversity in their sites, right? Have more communities from across the east side of the district and west side. So having sites that are pulling scholars from both sides is how do we engage with everyone, right? We know there's a population that usually shows up, but how do we go to those pockets of our communities that don't necessarily see themselves in the school building? That's been another theme that has showed up as well.
Cool, thank you. And then to kind of piggyback a little bit on Director Brooks' questions, how are we looking at working with community ed and Parks and Rec and ECFE and their parent educators and kind of, there's so many places that you can collaborate with. Where do you choose and how do you do it?
Yeah.
And how can we, do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, so we're actually, we've been working on identifying like who is our person in all of those areas. That's been another point of identifying that person and working alongside them to say, well, what is it that you're doing? So I think there's a lot of learning we're still doing with some of those areas of the district. And then moving into, okay, well, how can we collaborate? Because I think there's a lot of things taking place and we're learning, there's a lot of just conversations of, what are you providing? Are we providing that as well? And understanding how can we collaborate on that so there isn't a competition of services, but more of a collaboration in that process.
Right, there's no point in
Yeah.
reproducing something that's already out there. Yeah,
Right.
I totally get that. So my last question is, are we, again, with Director Brooks and the older students, which I see happens in a lot of places, I think sometimes we think there's many opportunities for them in sports and after-school activities that there's a population we don't quite reach. Is there any plan to maybe have some focus groups with students at the schools about what kinds of things they would need? Or maybe even they just don't know what things are there. I'm just thinking of my daughter who was an AmeriCorps volunteer at a youth center, and because it was a smaller community, everybody knew about this youth center, and if they felt like they just couldn't be wherever they were supposed to be because trauma happens, right? They had a place to go, and then how do we communicate that? It's so more complicated in an area like this.
Yeah, so one of the things we've been learning about is the spaces for our scholars that already exist, right? And learning how I know a lot of our equity specialists are doing some of that work, and so we've been in close conversations with them to figure out how can we partner with you, how can we strengthen, and then what are some areas that you may not be serving right now, and how can the FACE department come in and support in those areas. So we are having those conversations as well.
Yeah, and how can we help teachers?
Yep.
Because every kid hopefully every kid has a person in their building, right? A
Yeah.
person at least. And how do we help every person in the building kind of know how to help kids navigate that?
Absolutely.
That's what I liked about Minneapolis and St. Paul and their staff development area. Cool, thanks.
You saw the creeping up behind you?
Whoopsie.
So, you know, and these questions are absolutely great. And there's three people on the team. So one of the
Absolutely,
things-
absolutely.
One of the things that I've talked to my team about is the lens in which we are executing our work is that we are critical friends and capacity builders. Being critical friends and capacity builders, that we need to, that if there's a gap in the way that we're engaging, it doesn't rest on the shoulders of Vanessa, Kavan, or Luann. As we think about our district, we know that we use ESSER funds to fund some counselors, social workers, so on and so forth. That needs to be a resource for us to make sure that we're getting the information that we need. So then we think about what are our best practices and what are the principled way of being, the disposition that we want to execute and welcome each of our families in. That's how we're building the capacity and asking those critical questions. That's how we're showing up as critical friends. So yes, there's certainly a lot of work and opportunities and need that's out there. And I celebrate Vanessa and her team for asking the critical questions. And I want to keep them around for a long period of time. So I need to make sure that they've got the energy to go forward. So in that sense, and that's why I think the vision cards and we begin to triangulate and really focus and hone in our collective practice that we've been engaged in for the past little bit. That's how we develop our capacity and we show up better throughout our system, not in pockets of our system.
Yeah, just keep in mind, I'm just jazzed about it, so I'm
Yeah.
not
Nope,
asking you
all
to
right.
do everything in year one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a helpful foundational presentation. I'm looking forward to what you learn. I think it's, again, to the point that we have a 3-person investment in this. I think it's very wise to be thoughtful about what's already out there. I think that's something that's really important because we have a lot of resources in this district that is coming from outside of our district to support our scholars. And I think that being really thoughtful about how to best leverage that scale and direct those resources to the right places for impact is, I think, where the strategic value in this department is going to be. So I think that's wise, and I think thinking of how you as kind of the key direction setters and the strategy for what our students need from all of those resources is probably the best use of your time. Because right now, my observation is there's so many different people that want to do something, that are either doing something already, but they're fragmented at the site level. Maybe there's a church that wants to provide some resources, and so it's just very fragmented. So if we can leverage this department to really pull that in and focus it on what's going to make the biggest impact to what you identified here as welcoming, engaging climate with strong relationships and communication, partnering with families to support achievement, and investing in the families and community in school success. I think if we really provide that direction, that will make a tremendous impact. So I appreciate that this is very foundational, and I understand that we're just getting kind of the direction going. So it's a good foundational update. I would encourage you to look for quick wins. So where can we, as Director Brooks was kind of identifying, where do we know there's already an issue? And how can we maybe put some creative thinking into with our partners to kind of go after that as a quick solve. Well, nothing's a quick solve, but some quick ideation and priority setting around that. So while you're working on the big stuff and the big long-term items, really prioritizing those most important key issues that is affecting our scholars today and have the biggest impact and what we're trying to accomplish and why we set up and invested in this opportunity, I think would really put ourselves in the driver's seat for some success. So thank you for the update, helpful, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming next.
All right, Director Douglas.
Thank you. I agree with Director Simons's sentiments, and also I really wanted to highlight, I believe it was Director Mosqueda Jones that said that sometimes our scholars don't know that the opportunities exist. I think a lot of times our families and scholars don't know. As a very engaged parent, there's a lot of things that I don't know. that I learn about through other people who've already participated in those things. So I really do think that, you know, a lot of the things that are in this presentation are super wonderful things that we have committed to as a district and that we're working towards, and are very exciting. But I agree that I think that we really have to focus right now on how do we pull it all together in a more cohesive way, because it is very, I would say, like lopsided sometimes, where you know, you just don't know what resources are available to you. Number one, you don't know that they exist. You don't know how to access them. And oftentimes I think we find out about them as parents after the fact, right? And you're like, oh, shoot, I wish I would have found out about this sooner so that my child could participate in it. And I think that if we can find a way to leverage this team to connect all those pieces together in a way that unifies our district, really will give us the strength and that unity that we keep seeking as a district. And so I'm really looking forward to see what you guys learn about what already exists, and specifically when you mentioned what do we want to keep, what's working, and where do we have gaps, and what is not working, and you know, is it time to move on from this partnership or program or whatever it is, because we really, I think this board has said many times, we really want to focus our efforts on what is working so we can improve not only our engagement, which is of course a huge component of this group, but also our achievement, and ultimately strengthen the success of our district, our scholars, and the leadership. I really wanted to ask one question though. I wanted to know more about, sorry, let me find my slide. Your role as critical thought partners and co-creators with our sites.
So that's really joining them at the table as they're strategizing. So we're not doing the work for the sites. We're not, I think sometimes it could be construed as our job is to come and plan events for the sites, right? But our job is to be in conversation with them. And as Michael said, capacity builders, right? How can we be capacity builders with our sites to say, here are some options, right? Pulling on resources that we know are in the district or some of our personal knowledge that we've had from experience, and really saying, here are some options, here's what this can look like. What do you think is going to be best for your site? And as they decide their course of action, then providing, maybe it's coaching alongside them, maybe it's encouraging them. I know I sat in a conversation and they talked about how they were kind of piloting what does it look like to have translation in the meeting in person. And they were like, I don't think this is working. And I was like, oh, it's possible. I've seen it, right? And saying like, it is possible. Here's some examples, but here's some different options to try. And this is a year of learning. So kind of sitting at the table in that sense to say, we're not here to do any work for you. We're not here to tell you what to do, but we're here to sit with you as you strategize and create the strategy that's best for your site, your families, and your scholars.
I actually did have one, I don't know if it's a comment or question. So when I was previously on DPAC, one thing that came up a number of times was that some of the participants had mentioned creating sister PTOs or PTAs, basically helping each other across districts, because I know some of our sites don't have those types of programs. And so I guess what I would just suggest is maybe consider those types of resources that we have, and how can we bridge them across our district in ways, especially when you were talking about how do we pull in those families that don't feel like that they're represented in their schools. I think that by doing something like that, we could really enhance that initiative. So that is just my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like Director Brooks, did you have something else?
Yeah, just really quick before you close it out. So two things. One, again, just wanted to reiterate, if we can, please partner with the City of Brooklyn Park, Parks and Rec, police, whoever, to address some of those issues there. I think it's sort of all hands on deck right now in that city, and I think we need to be there as well. But the bigger thing I wanted to say is aside from, all of our amazing staff across the district that directly support our scholars on a day-to-day basis, I think, this team is one of our greatest assets. And so also, I just want to encourage you all to find a way to communicate what you're doing to the larger district and community. aside from just this presentation to the board. I know this is a huge priority across the district, and yeah, if we can communicate what our strategy is and progress and all those good things much more transparently to the community, I think that would help us all.
I just would like to close out by I just taking a moment to thank you all. I haven't been on the board very long, 3 years, but from the onset, the majority, most of the board has talked about how important engagement is. And you've really gone through, like, what does that mean to each of us? What does that mean to scholars? What does that mean to our staff and our community? And so I, myself, in my job, I work in engagement. It is not an easy, it's not like tomorrow you're going to just change the world, right? I mean, it is about, like you talked about, it's about two-way communication. It's about relationship building, and it's about sustainability. Because the one thing we don't want to have is like, in and out, it's about containing that. And I think what I've seen that I'm really proud of is that when I look, one of the things that, you've talked about is every family is valued, seen, and heard. And I don't think there's a time, as in right now, where that is more important to ensure we have a super diverse district, which is beautiful, and it's challenging. And so, all of our cities are hurting, and all of our kids are hurting in different ways, and we need to really make sure we're representing all of the areas of our community. And I see that in the RISE committee. It's not only culturally diverse, but it's geographically diverse, and I think that's what's going to really start to unite us. And in our presentation with Peter Leatherman, he talked a lot about, we've seen this like last couple of years of just like people word of mouth. And I think that's what we're building the capacity for in the RISE committee and in all of our different committees, is to spread that word. And so I just want to recognize how far FACE has come since, I know it's cliche, but it has been in the middle of a pandemic, a whole bunch of unknowns. So I just want to commend you on that. Let me just see if there's anything else. I think I love some of your examples around the real tangible ways you've been working with some of the PTOs. I love that instead of like fundraising, engaging more parents. That's the stuff we need to really that's that really intentional kind of like, what do you need at your site to bring your families to the table and to your families together? And that means something different. And I've always loved that sister PTO idea. I just love that idea. I think that's just awesome. And the last thing I would say is on the cheer camp slide, I just have to point out my girls are in here.
I thought so.
The best slide ever. No. But these are the experiences between the arts and the cooking classes and the, sports. This is what makes our, it just like, really fulfills our mission, because it's about academics, but it's also about the extracurricular experiences that our scholars can have. And, I even look at my family with 4 kids. My kids, they can't do everything because, it's expensive. So thank you for these opportunities through the summer, and it's so much to build on. So thank you so much, and we look forward to more coming.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presentation. The second one is Commemorative Recognitions, presented by Bolella, Director of Community Relations.
Good evening, Superintendent McIntyre, Chair Dawson Walton, and members of the board. Tonight, I'll be sharing the commemorative observances that our district plans to recognize this school year, and ways they'll be shared through our district's communication channels. This presentation is informational only. No action needs to be taken. There will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions and provide some feedback. Tonight, this will be the 3rd commemorative calendar proposed to the board. About a year ago, former school community relations director Barb Olson had shared 2 sets of calendars through one memo in September of 2020 and another in December of 2020. The editing that was done between these 2 calendars and the one proposed tonight will be shared here momentarily. Before moving forward, our current community relation team felt it was important to revisit the criteria used for these observances. As shared in late 2020, observances are identified by the Library of Congress and the Office of Personnel Management. Since then, our district has had board resolutions identifying specific observances, most notably George Floyd and systemic racism, which added Juneteenth. Again, as shared in 2020, employee groups or academic areas of recognition are identified when a school group's state or national professional association has defined an observance or an official proclamation has been made. Our community relations team also added a third point that observances cannot be religiously founded. So this slide here shows the differences between the September and December memos. It lists out, and these were based purely on your feedback. So a total of 9 edits were made at that time. So under the first point, all were adds. So the Constitution Day and Citizenship Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, Inclusive Schools Week, Human Rights Day, Irish American Heritage Month, and Law Day were all added. American Indian Heritage Month was an exchange from Native American Heritage Month. Then kind of looking underneath the deletions, the Educational Support Professionals Day that was deleted does not refer to our ESP employee group. It encompasses many educational support staff as part of American Education Week, which we do recognize. Please note there is also a Paraprofessionals Day included on our calendar. So between September and December of 2020, the district went from 31 observances to 37. Today's updated proposal includes the December 2020 observances with some slight tweaks. In general, our district holidays were added. Those include New Year's Day, President's Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, and Thanksgiving. School Bus Driver Appreciation Day was added as it was a proclamation by the governor last school year. School Bus Safety Week was moved from the National Week to the Drills Week required by statute, and you saw some of those in the Points of Pride too, earlier this evening. Asian Pacific American Heritage Month was renamed to Asian American and Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. This was a change made by the organization heading the observance in 2009. Some of the observances that have been taken off since the December 2020 calendar, National Assistant Principals Week. We already have a National Principals Week month that we're recognizing, which also encompasses all principals, including APs. Jewish American Heritage Month, it falls into a religious category. And then also Irish American Heritage Month. All Heritage Months in the latest calendar that we'll be sharing here momentarily are demographically aligned to the Minnesota Department of Education's ethnic groups. Deleting this seemed to make the most alignment. So from December 2020 until today, the district has gone from 37 observances to 41. So this is a full list that you're seeing at the calendar currently being used for the 21-22 school year. And I just wanted to note there are some with an asterisk noted next to them. That's just being a note to that the National School Public Relations Association has a school calendar, and those just were not included, but the majority, as you can see, were included, so those are 4. So these are some examples of how this is about communication specifically, how each of these observances might be shared, either in district e-newsletters, the district website, district social media pages, or the ESC outdoor sign. Each observance will be different in both the communication channel or channels being used as well as the content. Doing so leaves room for flexibility as we focus on the positive happenings inside of our schools. Observances are shared best when it can be linked to something going on in our classrooms. That's not going to be possible in all cases, but our community relations team will strive to do this. And then just 2 items of note to keep in mind. Community relations will provide these observances listings to school leaders for their information only. And also, these observances do not imply any expectations regarding teaching and learning. So at this point, if, I'll open it up to any questions or comments that you have.
I have a question. Yep. So for the Jewish American Heritage Month, you said that that is religious. And obviously, there's the Jewish religion, but also there's a lot of people who identify as Jewish ethnically, not religiously. I feel like that could be a area of contention if we take that out.
I can definitely take that into consideration.
I think on that same point, I think one of the things that I was processing in my mind as you were going through the presentation is how so many of the religions that we are not acknowledging or recognizing are very much cultural as well. And I think we're missing an opportunity to acknowledge some of the various cultures that are within our district as well by completely sort of disregarding those holidays or days of celebration. And so I understand why it was in the criteria not to be considered, but I am sort of struggling with a missed opportunity to celebrate the diverse culture that we have in our district.
Do you happen to have some examples of some of those that you might be thinking about?
Well, I mean, I think going back to the Jewish American Heritage Month, and some of the Jewish holidays that we have to sort of take into account in our operations anyway, deciding not to hold a meeting on a certain day or not acknowledging on maybe social media that it's a big cultural holiday in our district. Like those, I think that's what I mean in terms of sort of missed opportunities to celebrate and acknowledge diverse cultures.
Okay.
I would agree with Director Brooks. I think I understand that we want to connect commemorative dates to kind of the classroom, to maybe something that's not just a social media post, but I think we have to use a little common sense that posting something on social media and acknowledging something of importance in our communities and cultures is pretty simple and straightforward, and it doesn't feel like it has to take a lot of significant effort, really. So I can understand listing the ones that we want to feel like we're investing something a little bit bigger behind it, but I mean, recently, it was the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and we didn't say anything, and I thought that was just a real lack of common sense, and a lot of members of our community pointed that out, as well as some other holidays this past year. So I like that we've improved upon getting this set for this next year, but I think that we can't have this rigid list dictate common sense when we see what's happening, especially when we see other government entities in our community acknowledging important dates and events. I mean, if the city of Brooklyn Park, the city of Maple Grove are commemorating some calendar events and cultural events, it just seems like common sense for us to apply that and not be so rigid. So I do think that we have to consider that as we go forward. With the changes, some of those, I see that we now have only ethnic heritage represented that include, there are no European ones anymore. So I just think that that's an interesting consideration when we think about our whole student population, and that we want everybody to feel included and belonging, and that all of our cultural backgrounds are important. I understand that we want to be particularly sensitive to maybe underrepresented groups and groups that haven't been recognized before, but I am observing that, and I think that our community might observe that also. So that's my feedback.
If I could just add, also, Patriot Day is still not on here. September 11th is not listed on here, which is a really significant day to our nation's history. But also, the specific feedback that I have received countless times when certain things that are important to people have not been shared, yet many other things that they feel are not important to them necessarily personally, but are important to the greater community, are being significantly represented. I know you know, we've received a lot of communication from families and people who are upset that we're not recognizing certain holidays or important events, Heritage Month, for whatever nationality it is. Yet we are still including other things in here. It seems very one-sided to a lot of our families, that their interests are not being represented or shared by the district either. And so I struggle because I understand specifically with religious holidays that there's very many religions, and it would be very difficult to make sure that we're honoring our community who celebrates in all of these varied religious traditions and holidays that maybe we aren't even aware of. But at the same time, it seems like we're over, I feel like either we should either narrow it down further and be very specific in what we're doing, or we need to open it up and do more. And I don't know how my colleagues feel, but it seems like if we don't narrow it down, we're gonna continue to face conflict around this issue unless we open it up and really intentionally engage in celebrating a multitude of important commemorative days for all the members of our community.
To me,
My
it
only-
would really,
Oh.
sorry.
I guess, I think this happened last time we met. It's really hard, because, it's like, I'm sure for you, it's like, okay, so what exactly which ones is missing? Because, I mean, if I look at the 41 to what Director Simon said, I only see Hispanic Heritage Month, Indigenous Peoples Day. So there's 5, unless I'm 6 maybe,
A few
that are
bullet points
culturally
have multiple.
specific maybe. So, I didn't see, I guess don't see the same. I'm definitely September 11th, 100% agree. So how do you want to proceed? I mean, do you want us to, this is a good discussion, and we know that, there's varied views. We're not done yet. Director Grady, you can go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say thank you for putting this together. It's a lot to balance between, and you use the research to figure out how to prioritize the days, thinking about our separation of church and state, as well as being accountable to celebrating our communities within the school district. No proposal is going to have every date. I think it's really good for what we have, and it also respects the capacity that we have and that you have as our communications director to be able to get these kinds of messaging out. I think any more would be too much to manage, and I just really appreciate how you've pared this down and been really transparent about how you went through that process and how you've prioritized what our needs are. Thank you.
So I know this is a kind of a difficult position for you to be in, with the board having to discuss this for the first time in a business meeting. I do think we need more discussion on this, not just for this year to come, but just to also set precedent for the future as well. I think one of my big concerns, and I think you've certainly added to this, and you've certainly added some dates to this, but it's the concern, I think, as a board member, to not have something acknowledged on social media. And I am enjoying my holiday, my well-earned holiday like everyone else, and I have to find out the next day that the district did nothing to recognize that holiday. And so that's a concern that I don't want to have to worry about in the future. And so I don't know how that is clarified or addressed through this plan that was presented today. So that's one thing. And then 2, it mentions in the criteria that school board resolutions, including the George Floyd and systemic racism resolution, were part of the criteria, and I'm just wondering how that translates to the dates that were in the proposal.
That was just specifically for Juneteenth.
Okay.
Juneteenth was added. It was not on, or it might have been on the latter 2020, but
Okay.
that was an ad.
Thank you.
And if I can add there, since then, it's become a federal holiday, so things do evolve and change, and being, moments where I still feel new here myself, along with Kay, we dug back, and we, in the recent history, for whatever reason, didn't observe holidays that way. So clearly, there's a desire to do that, and hopefully you're seeing the willingness to make that change. But, I look back and talk to Barb, and she's like, that was never a conversation in the past, and never really came up. But I think just everything we've been through, and the importance, like I think Director Douglas, you pointed out a few things that we're looking at things differently now. So this is the kind of input and feedback we are looking for to continue to, build and update this list. We need a starting point, kind of a reset, because we tried that right before the pandemic, if I remember right. And I know Director Olson at the time was going to come back, and then we really all got diverted with other focus areas. So I appreciate Director Bolella bringing it back to you and really getting some feedback. It might take a couple updates. I feel like every time I look at it, I see something different that we might be missing or needing to consider. So we needed a grounding, kind of a fresh starting point again. So this is really helpful to get your perspective so that Kay and her team can go back and really begin to build the list that you feel as a board is best reflective of our district moving forward. So there's a couple different ways we can do that and make it kind of efficient and convenient for all of you as well. But we at least want to start publicly here tonight with kind of a reset on the changes that we've been initially talking about. So I know Director Mosqueda-Jones, you still probably want to weigh in on this as well. So thanks for letting me jump in.
The only thing I wanted to say is I think it's good to have a starting place. It's not like we're voting on this as, the way it's going to be for the next, millennia or anything like that. I'm good with this list. I'm good with adding Patriot Day on there.
I also think that, given the strategic direction and priorities, I think all of us are saying, like, just that belonging is so important to make sure everyone's reflected, and I do agree with Director Simons. I think it is, like, even just say, people look at social media, and it does matter, so. Does anybody else have anything?
I do.
Okay.
Just on the criteria, observances cannot be religiously founded. Can you elaborate on that criteria, please? Like, did you decide it cannot be, or is there statute that exists?
There's not a statute that exists. That was our community relations team. And I believe it was in the December 2020 memo that Director Olson at the time shared as well. And that example, she referred to Christmas specifically.
So,
as an example.
I could be wrong about this, but it's been a long time. When I grew up in this district and I went to school here, we did learn about other religious holidays in our classrooms, various ones. And that was just part of learning about other cultures and communities, people that may be sitting in our classroom beside us. And I found that to be really useful for me in life growing up, because then I understood why other people celebrate certain holidays and why it's important. And I think for me personally now more than ever, to exactly what Kelsey was saying, Director Dawson Walton was saying, is that our families are really looking for that engagement and that recognition. And I just feel like, saying, and I know we've shifted away from, we don't say Christmas break anymore, we say winter break, and same with Easter, we say spring break, and I think those are all great things because it encompasses, it doesn't narrow that to one thing, and it allows other people to freely and comfortably celebrate and talk about their own holidays and experiences. But I also think that when I see our communities, Maple Grove, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, when they share things on social media that are religiously oriented or specific to a specific culture or community, they get such an incredible engagement from the people in that community who are like, hey, you're paying attention, you recognize me, you're honoring me, you're supporting me. And I feel like that's one very small way that we can have a positive impact on our community and show that we really are one district and that we honor and accept people of all different communities and cultural backgrounds. And I just really feel like social media is really powerful. A lot of people get their information from that. And sometimes it's the only source of information that they get and the only way that they feel that connection piece. And also, it's easy. It's very easy to schedule out in advance known dates or times, things that we want to communicate to our community. And I think that I know it's easy, like for me, one person doing something, but I know you have a much broader job than just doing that. So I'm not trying to minimize your work and all the other things that you have to do. But I just think that maybe we could come up with a way that we consider whether or not that's appropriate for our district and what we want to do going forward. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate too, so these observances, whether it's this list or a different list, they aren't necessarily all going to be shared on social media. We're going to utilize all the district communication channels that we have. We're going to utilize e-newsletter. It may or may not be in on the social media page. So that gives us some flexibility so that we can share the good news going on in our schools as well. Because if we do have to be careful. I think our list is getting pretty lengthy right now. And if we continue to add and add and add, my fear is that that's going to be our social media page. It's going to be all about observances, and that's what's going on in our schools. So there is a happy medium, and unfortunately, this is tough. It's tough for every school district. We're not going to make everybody happy. It's not. We can continue to add, and I'm happy to if you have suggestions, please share them with me. I'm happy to listen to them. So please do that. And we can definitely present more options too. But this is something that we are going to share, like I said, in multiple communication channels.
And I think we can take your suggestions tonight and provide you with a revised list based on your feedback tonight. And we can do that in a couple different ways so that we can move it along a little faster. Because I want to get us settled on this so we can make sure we don't miss some things as we're moving into the deeper part of the school year. So maybe we can do that through my updates or some other things where you can kind of share and offer some suggestions. I think if you sit and look at that a little bit more, you might think of some other things and give you a little more time to digest what Kay's put together for you here tonight.
I think one of the things that I would just say, and I'll be done, is I do acknowledge that I think what the cities and the county and all of those don't have are all of the educational related recognition weeks and days that we have on our side. So that does add to the social media calendar as well. And that's something I've thought about as well. But if we could, I think at minimum, reach out and see what neighboring school districts are doing and the cities and county, et cetera. Just because the optics, when we miss it, the optics don't look great.
I've reached out to several school districts nationwide to help create this list, and this is a hefty resource, but it includes multiple pages, and there's days every single day of the year almost that we could be sharing. This is specifically on schools. So yes, I do have the input that I received back is included in here.
And thank you for prioritizing, making sure that we have those channels all clear for the most important messages that we need to get out. Because we are sending out a lot of really important instructional, educational, COVID, health kinds of updates, and those need to be, freely available without a ton of other clutter too. Thank you.
So maybe if we just, have suggestions, we can email Corey and, kind of talk through, because I think I've heard some kind of themes here on, the importance of having a presence. And, there were some things that we didn't do this year that I think made an impact. So thank you so much. And we will move on to our final presentation of the night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. All right, preliminary fiscal year 2021 financial report presented by John Morstad, Executive Director of Finance and Operations, and Kelly Benusa, Director of Business Services.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Dawson Walton, Superintendent McIntyre, and members of the board. Tonight, we'll be presenting the preliminary financial results for our fiscal year that ended on June 30th of 2021, and also the corresponding 5-year budget forecast look going forward. Tonight's kind of a special night because it kicks off the start of the FY23 budget process. We use the audit results as a baseline to establish our projection going forward, and then later in the evening, we will ask you to approve the preliminary levy for taxes payable in '22 that fund the 2023 school year. So I would like to turn over to Kelly Benusa, Director of Business Services, who will present the audit results.
So to start off, I just want to thank the entire Business Services team for all of their efforts during this process. I especially want to recognize our coordinators of Business Services, Mike Hewlett, who's in the audience with us this evening, as well as Michelle Larson, and then our Business Services accountant, Liz Lanto. These 3 individuals are instrumental to ensuring our audit is performed at the highest level of expectation. The school board has before them a memo along with 3 attached exhibits which summarize the financial results. The first being discussed tonight is the General Transportation Fund. This fund includes the primary operations of the district in providing educational services to students from pre-kindergarten through grade 12, including our transportation activities. Exhibit 2 shows the general fund revenue and expenditure budget variance, and the combined variance was a positive 2.5%. This was more than our budget planning benchmark of 2% due to the changing learning models and the impact of COVID-19. Exhibit 1 shows the actual results in comparison with the budget amounts. The general operating and transportation revenues were over budget by $310,000, or 0.12%. Tax collections increased $869,000 from our budgeted amounts, and general education aid was lower by 37 fewer adjusted pupil units, or APUs, and 64 fewer extended time APUs from our budget amounts. And then our prior year under accruals were included in that as well. Overall, the revenues were over budget by the $310,000, and this variance is comparing the budget to actual results. Salaries were under budget by $3.9 million, or 2.42%. This variance is mainly due to the impact of COVID-19. First, $2.3 million for open positions, overtime, casual assignments, and unused budget capacity. Second, $890,000 in adjustments for grants. And lastly, $742,000 in substitute position savings. The variance for employee benefits can be attributed to 2 main areas. First, unemployment was $1,118,000 less than anticipated due to the state of Minnesota utilizing federal funds to reduce claims related to COVID-19 for school districts. And second, employee health insurance and HSA contributions were $121,000 more than projected. Purchase service expenditures were $3.9 million under budget. Transportation contract services and snow removal were under budget by $3,386,000 and $234,000 respectively. Transportation budget capacity was maintained to allow flexibility due to our learning model changes caused by COVID-19. Utilities were under budget due to energy efficiency tactics and the impact of COVID-19, and then other purchase services were under budget by $1.6 million. Tuition paid to districts and PSEO paid to colleges were under budget by $328,000, and the remaining variance is due to the impact of COVID-19 and cost containment of management and staff. Repairs were under budget by $203,000. And staff development was under budget by $316,000 due to the impact of COVID-19. Supplies, capital, and other expenditures were under budget by $1.7 million. General and instructional supplies were under budget by $1.7 million. The variance is due to the impact of COVID-19 as well as cost containment. The fuel was over budget by $149,000 due to inflationary cost increases. Overall, a positive variance of $12.6 million or 4.82% was achieved when comparing actual expenditures with our budgeted amounts. Exhibit 2 is the fiscal year 21 General Transportation Fund Financial Summary. The district's planning benchmark is that actual revenues and expenditures will be within 2% of our budgeted totals. The district's size of operations is $516 million when combining our revenue and expenditure budgets. The district's procedures are to analyze those revenue and expenditure budgets and to revise the adopted budgets to match our available estimates. The net revenue expenditure budget variance was $12.9 million or 2.5%. This was outside our planning benchmark parameters of 2%. Due to the changing learning models and the impact of COVID-19, budget capacity was maintained in most of our areas due to the uncertainty of the remaining of the school year. In comparing OSSEO to its financial benchmark districts, OSSEO's percent is similar to those others with a range of 2 to 4%. Exhibit 3 is the fund balance summary for all funds. Overall, the fund balances for all funds, as shown on the bottom of Exhibit 3, increased from the prior year amount by $24.5 million. The General Transportation Fund in blue increased fund balance by almost $8.1 million, as described in Exhibit 1, when including our non-operating funds, such as grants, gifts, and student activities. Our capital expenditure land proceeds fund in yellow increased fund balance by about $12,000. The fund balance of $8 million is restricted by state statute for facilities, equipment, textbooks, technology, and long-term facilities maintenance. The Food and Nutrition Services Fund in purple increased fund balance to $4.7 million or 40% of actual annual expenditures. We continue utilizing these resources to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of operations through future capital improvements. The Community Service Fund in green increased fund balance to $2.7 million, or 22% of all expenditures. Under state law, all revenue and fund balance are reserved for community education programs. The Building Construction Fund balance increased $10.8 million. This increase was due to the issuance of the facility maintenance bonds for future long-term facility maintenance projects according to the plan approved by the board, and the issuance of the certificates of participation for the Rice Lake Elementary project. And finally, Debt Service Fund increased by $1.2 million. Debt Service Fund revenues and expenditures represent amounts necessary to meet our principal and interest payments scheduled associated with the long-term debt of the district. Next, I'm going to share the tactic portion of the base and tactic document dated September 28th that was included in the board materials. The fiscal year 23 budget planning financial forecast has been updated to reflect the 21 financial results. The actual 2021 column now shows a $7 million increase in fund balance, and the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures is 37.3%. The fiscal year 22 adopted budget column includes two tactics related to revenue. First, the basic formula allowance increase of 2.45% will be included in the fiscal year 22 mid-year budget adjustment. This increase was not included in the adopted budget since the legislature had not finished the session in time to be included in the budget adoption. Second, the student recapture of students is below projection at this time and is resulting in a decrease of revenue. There are two tactics related to expenditures. First is the recapture of budget capacity for staffing of classroom teachers and 279 online programs that would have only been deployed if enrollment was greater than those projections. Second, we'll be utilizing federal funds to offset ADSIS costs for the first 2 years of the program. The net impact of the revenue and expenditure tactics is a positive $4.4 million on projected ending fund balance for fiscal year '22. The projected fiscal year '23 column includes 3 tactics related to revenue. First, the basic formula allowance increase of 2% will be included in the revenue calculations. Second, the one-time levy adjustments are negative $1.9 million, based on the most recent report available from MDE, which John Morstead will be sharing later this evening. And then also for fiscal year '24, we're projecting to have a negative $1.4 million in adjustments for reemployment. Third, access programs started in fiscal year '22 will now generate revenue at 55% of expenditures from the previous year. There are 4 tactics related to expenditures. First, enrollment for fiscal years '23 through '26 are based on last year's projections. As we move forward in the budget planning process, this amount will change based on the updated 5-year enrollment projection that's completed in December. Second, reducing the expenditure trend to 3% has been included in the model. Third, 55% of the ADSIS expenditures will be funded through the General Operations Fund to match the revenue being received in '23. The remaining ADSIS expenditures will then need to be added in fiscal year '24. Lastly, in order to sustain programs and services, federal funds will be utilized in fiscal years '23 and '24, and then added back in fiscal year '25. By utilizing these tactics, no operational reductions would be needed for fiscal year '23. This model also includes the assumption that the existing operating referendum is renewed at its existing level and is in place for '25 and '26. After utilizing the tactics for revenues and expenditures, the operational reductions are needed as follows. For fiscal years '24, $2 million. For '25, $3 million. And then for fiscal years '26, $6 million. These are combined reductions of $11 million. An alternative tactic was created that shows the existing operating referendum being renewed and then adding authority to go to the operating referendum cap. By utilizing this revenue tactic, there would not be a need for operational reductions through fiscal years 2026. So in summary, the year-end results are better than anticipated due to the significant continued impact of COVID-19, the changing learning models throughout the school year, the utilization of federal funds to offset additional costs, and as well as continued efforts from both staff and administration. These combined efforts have reduced the needs for future budget reductions in fiscal years '23. However, we're still facing budget reductions in '24 through '26, depending on the future direction regarding the operating referendum, which will need to be renewed and or added to beginning in fiscal year '25 at a minimum. The fiscal year '21 financial results will be incorporated into the long-range financial planning process as designed. As usual, the board will be providing direction and taking action in 3 different fiscal years over the next several months. This action will be impacted by the positive year-end results for fiscal years '21. First, on November 9th, we'll continue the formal '23 budget planning process at the board's work session. These year-end results will be incorporated into the long-range financial planning process. Second, the auditors will present the '21 audit report at the November 16th school board meeting. And finally, these results will be utilized in the fiscal year '22 mid-year budget update and then brought forward for approval at the February 22nd school board meeting. And that concludes the presentation for this evening.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions?
I have a couple of questions, or clarifications, I should say. Just so everyone's clear on this planning forecast, 25 and 26 are assumed just a renewal of the operating levy, correct?
Correct.
And then what is our assumption for money from the state in 24, 25, and 26?
Yep. In '24 and '26, the
24,
model.
25, 26.
Yep. So in fiscal year '24, the model assumes that we'd have a 1%, which is the first year of the next biennium, and then also another 1% in '26, which would be the first year of the next biennium after that.
Okay, and then are we doing 0 for the second year?
And then 0 for the second as of right now.
And that's increased from our previous 0 at all times, correct? We
No,
changed this like about a year
that's
ago.
our normal rhythm is that we assume we get 1%
Okay.
in each biennium, and we put that in the first year, which is typically your funding year.
Sure. And obviously, the adopted 22 and the projected 23 are including the current 2%
Yes.
from the state.
Yes, what was approved this last spring.
So even with all of that, we're looking at spending down our fund balance this year
Yes.
for 11 million, spending down 11 million,
Yes.
just to
Which-
maintain our.
Which is an
current-
improvement of 4.4 million.
Yep, got it. Thank you. Just wanted to be clear for everybody listening.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Anybody have?
No, I'm very thorough as always and clear, appreciate all the work that goes into it. I think, the increase in the fund balance is very clearly laid out with the change in operations and the learning models. I think, with it being a little, with it being a healthy addition, even though we are spending some back, we gained 7, we're spending back the 11, as Director Mosqueda pointed out. I think this board is likely to be highly supportive if there are other investments that are needed to close the learning gap. And I think that would be the appropriate way to utilize funding that was derived from COVID impact. So I think you know that already, Superintendent McIntyre, but I just want to assure you in the public that we have always been supportive of reinvesting short-term funding that was freed up for short-term investments to get us back on track.
Excellent point.
Maybe
yes.
this is a good spot for me to jump in.
Yeah, perfect. Go ahead.
I didn't know when the right moment would be, but a couple things. I'd really want to say thank you to Kelly and the team. Remember a year ago, the kinds of conversations we were having? I wrote in my notes a very unpredictable year. Then I thought, maybe the most unpredictable year in 100 years, in some ways, right? We didn't know what was coming 2 weeks from now, and we were going through this all year. So we knew even when we did the mid-year last year, we didn't know what was coming. And in the end, oddly enough, this is kind of good news. I'd rather come out ahead and have some, this gives us some added flexibility. It gives us some added opportunities to maybe respond to some things we need to address. Short-term, as long as we're still thinking long-term planning, a little bit of both. And we're still kind of working through with our team the things we were able to do. We were able to do quite a lot with our ESSERs 1, 2, and now 3. And even with all those things, the board has always tried to stay committed to our strong efforts from recruiting and retaining and compensating competitively our workforce, right? So while balancing, how do we do, like even when we do with ESSERs 2, this notion of some burst of service supports with academic, mental health, behavioral support, some health and safety things we had to do. So we're going to do exactly what you just suggested, is evaluate where are some opportunities there while we're still being really responsible looking out. We've been fortunate to not have to make really deep cuts since about 2008. And we have some other large districts in the state that are facing those kinds of situations, and we don't want to be there either. So it's like kind of finding that balance while we're planning ahead for that operating renewal. And even what we know now is different than what we know 3 months ago. The audit will be finalized as well, and as we begin to that referendum process, really taking the pulse of our community and what's tolerable, right, around those kinds of things. So there's a lot of intersecting pieces, but I'll come back to the part that, I think this is good news in a sense that in some of the categories where we came in under, we knew that was going to happen. We just didn't have to do some of those things, and we knew leave those budgets there because we just didn't know if and when we would need them as throughout the course of last year. So, and where we landed, I think I heard you say, Kelly, is very similar to where a lot of other districts landed, somewhere in that 2 to 4% was kind of a typical finding, depending on the district's current financial status, and ours has always been fairly strong. So I think what I would suggest is, now that you've heard this, we'll continue to, are there some things we need to address short-term without putting us in a tough spot, and we've been able to push back some reductions with this outcome, along with some of the ESSER's funding as well, kind of balancing those competing challenges, right? And Director Mosquito-Jones, I appreciate you kind of pointing out, gaining clarification. Do you remember a year ago, we thought we had a $4 billion state deficit? What a year later, we would have never thought where we ended up. So it's just, that's how quickly things can change. So I think our model has served us well over time to really keep us pretty stable and prevented some really, really hard things from happening. So thanks for letting me jump in. I know others want to comment.
It's great to hear. All aligned. Anyone have anything else? Or else I just want to thank you both. I think Director Simons kind of said it all for all of us, so thank you, and it feels good to be in this position so we can be responsive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next agenda item is a consent agenda. Board members, are there any items you would like to remove or for separate consideration? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Director Grady, seconded by Director Douglas to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion passes 6-0.
Have fun on those field trips. I got a couple of emails saying, please vote for it, so.
Yeah, they look like fun.
All right.
I know, right?
Our first action item is the initial certification of preliminary tax levy payable in 2021 for fiscal year 2022. And John Morstead, you are back to share some more information.
Just trying to get our view right here.
Okay.
That's going to be tricky. It's changed from last time. What's that? No, I mean, I could do it off this, you can see it, but I know it's fine for everyone to see the notes, but we'll get by. I apologize, for some reason I can't get the two screens on one on presenter and one not. And that's where my notes are. So thank you, Chair Dawson Walton. So this evening, we are going to be asking the board to approve the 2021 payable and 2022 primary levy or preliminary levy. State statute requires that the school district certify and the school board certify the preliminary levy by September 30th of each year. The purpose of this approval is to provide information to the Hennepin County Auditor so that property tax statements can be prepared and mailed out to taxpayers by November 24th. And then final levy certification will take place on December 14th at the regular school board meeting. During that process, there's a truth in taxation hearing where we'll present final levy information, a budget summary, allow for public comment, and then ask the board to approve a final dollar amount for the levy. So the legislature has authorized Minnesota school districts to levy and collect property taxes for specific elements of school funding. About 55% of the dollars levied are authorized through voter approval. The remainder of the levy items are authorized by state statute as a mechanism to provide specific funding for student programs and operational expenses. This is a unique time of year for a district as we are working in 3 different financial years at the exact same time. As you heard from Kelly Benusa's presentation on the preliminary results of the audit from '21. We're currently working and operating in the 22 budget and starting to the discussion on setup for the 23 budget. So this slide, I will refer to Exhibit A in your board packet. It's a summary of our total levy by fund. As you'll see, the levy is showing an increase of $1,581,000, or 1.57%. Oops. We're going to look at a few of the individual items. So there's 4 ways that the levy can be changed. A change in state law, adjustments to our pupil unit counts or a population change, changes in your market value or tax capacity, and then finally there are certain levy items that are driven by expenditures, so they're adjusted back to actual. We put an estimate in and it gets adjusted to actual after the expenditure's taken place. This slide is, you can refer to Exhibit C in your board materials. Again, you're looking at a preliminary increase of 1.57%. Wanted to highlight the net tax capacity, which is an increase of 5.94%. What this is overall the market value of our district as an entire whole is increasing, and what that does is spreads any levies out a little bit farther by that 5.9% more. So it helps to keep the cost of the levies down to the individual taxpayer. The next 4 slides look at changes in the general fund levies. This is focusing on Exhibit B in your packet. If you're looking, the first column is going to highlight the preliminary payable 22 levy compared to the final payable 21 levy, and then the dollar amount and the percent change as you go across. So the largest individual item in our levy is our operating referendum. Oops, sorry. So it has a voter-approved inflation index tied to it. So the inflation index that's applied this year is 1.95% times our average or adjusted pupil unit. So it's good to point out that the actual amount that the district is proposing is currently under the suggested inflation that MDE has calculated for us. That you take that pupil unit times that inflation, and then the actual amount of the referendum is $1,561 and change per pupil is what we have as the adjusted number for this year. Local optional revenue, the district is allowed with board approval $724 per pupil. It was a little bit of a change in 2020. There were 2 functions. There was a local optional for $424 and then a board approved for $300, which were merged together. So that's what makes up the $724 here. This is an equalized levy. However, that is driven by how much market value your district has. And in our situation, our market value requires that our local optional is funded 100% through the levy. I'll highlight the capital projects levy. It is increasing by 5.9%. Again, this is a direct function of the value of our district. So as you saw that 5.94% go up, you're seeing the same amount reflected here. Our current authorization is that net tax capacity times 3.701%. So this is also one of the referenda that is coming into its, I think it's in its second to last year. It has 1 more year left after this year, and will need renewal at that point. And also wanted to take a quick comment on the operating capital. This is linked very much to our building age, and then also a number of students that we get, but it's indexed to the building age. Next section of general fund changes we're going to cover. I want to highlight just for one item, which is the reemployment insurance. And Kelly in the audit results mentioned that there was a savings for us. The district was definitely a beneficiary from the state using some of their federal money to offset our unemployment costs, and that's where we see that reduction of a little over $1 million that we will see reflected in the 23 budget. The last section of general fund changes, The item I'd really like to highlight, a couple of them here. First is long-term facilities maintenance. This is our pay-as-you-go portion, which funds our deferred maintenance plans on that rolling 10-year plan. We actually designed this so that we're funding it to try to keep our levy as flat as possible. So as an example, you will see an increase of 2.7 million here, but you're going to see a decrease as we get to the debt service. One of our OPEB, the debt on our OPEB bond was finally retired, and so you'll see a $2.8 million decrease there. So we can balance the two to help make sure there's not a dramatic tax impact to our taxpayers. The other item I just want to highlight is the building leases, and this is where we are levying for principal and interest payments for additions to buildings, the example given before, Rice Lake, some of the senior high additions. And there's a few other smaller things in there, such as some leases for activities where we can't provide the right facility. Example I would give you is a ski team needs Highland Hills or something like that to be able to perform. So we actually lease that for them to be able to use it. Also, graduation expense, leasing Mariucci to be able to use that or perform that ceremony, and also any of our portion of intermediate 287's leases. So general fund as a whole is increasing by just under 2.4 million or 2.9%. Now we are going to move into the community service fund changes. I just want to take a chance to thank Brian Severson Hall for providing the information to help with the getting to the total here for the community service fund. It is very stable. Comparatively, you're seeing a 1.9% increase, which is essentially inflation. The debt service fund, top line is, this accounts for our regular debt service payment. These are our planned principal and interest payments that as we sell bonds for any number of things, this is how we're paying that off. Want to highlight the debt excess line. So we're required by statute to levy 105% of those principal and interest payments. That builds up as a fund balance over time. I believe you saw in the presentation $1.2 million was in the fund balance in the debt service fund. And then we'll come back here and through formulas by MDE, they will determine that we should take a little over $1 million of that and give it back as a credit back to the levy. So that's what you're seeing in this line. And then there's some prior year adjustments. But as a whole, debt service fund is reducing by about $833,000. With that, I would offer you the final levy summary and request that the board approve the 2021 payable 2022 levy at the maximum level. Again, as a reminder from our work session on the 14th, the reason we ask for maximum is to provide maximum flexibility between now and the December meeting when we're going to ask you to certify an actual dollar amount. That allows time for MDE and our staff to ensure that the numbers we're providing for you in December are 100% accurate. There is a lot of fluctuation. And again, as a reminder, our first crack at doing the levy started on September 8th. So we went from September 8th to today, 17 working days, to come up with every possible detail for $102 million. So there's a chance that something could be slightly wrong, and that's why we ask for that flexibility. And at this time, I would be happy to entertain any questions.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the initial certification of preliminary tax levy payable in 2021 for fiscal year 2022?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Director Brooks, seconded by Director Mosqueda-Jones. Is there any discussion?
I just want to say thank you for the presentation. And I just wanted to comment that I know that it wasn't intentional, but I actually like having the notes on the screen.
Sometimes there's good mistakes, you know?
So maybe if we can find a way to, leverage that mistake in the future, that would be.
No, it's a great idea. Happy to.
Closed caption.
What's that?
It's like closed caption for
Yeah,
us.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Just to highlight, next steps will be December 14th, where we'll come back, do truth and taxation, and present the final dollar amount. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we have next several agenda items. Executive Director of Human Resources Laurel Anderson will share information. So our next action item is a recommendation for approval agreement on the terms and conditions of employment between the Independent School District 279 School Board and Education Support Professionals, ESPs, July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2022.
Good evening, Chair Dawson Walton, school board members, Superintendent McIntyre. I will be reviewing all 4 contracts in one presentation, and then you can vote individually. So on the agenda this evening for school board action are recommendations for approval for 4 employee group contracts: administrative educational support professionals, educational support professionals, Kid Stop instructors, and registered and licensed practical nurses. The contracts you'll be considering this evening include approximately 850 employees who serve in absolutely essential frontline support positions throughout the district. Each of these agreements expired on June 30th, 2020, and the new agreements contain language changes that reflect current district practices, as well as additional provisions that serve to support our district mission and strategic priorities. School board members have had the opportunity to review the proposed changes to the provisions contained in the terms and conditions, to ask questions, and to consider financial implications. Specific contract changes are outlined in the memos included in your board packet. The new contract provisions fall within the financial parameters set by the school board for the 2020-2022 contract term. It's the superintendent's and my recommendation that you approve the employee contracts presented to you this evening. Thank you.
All right. So the first one, is there a motion to approve the agreement on the terms and conditions of employment between the Independent School District 279 School Board and Educational Support Professionals, July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2022?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, motion by Director Douglas, seconded by Director Brooks. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right. Yay, motion passes 6-0. All right. And just go on to the next one. All right, is there a motion to approve the agreement on the terms and conditions of employment between the Independent School District 279 School Board and Administrative Educational Support Professionals, July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2022?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Director Mosquito Jones, seconded by Director Grady. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes 6-0. Yay, okay. Okay. Our next, okay, so is there a motion to approve the agreement on the terms and conditions of employment between Independent School District 279 School Board and RNs, LPNs, July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2022?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Director Grady, second by Director Douglas. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passes 6-0. Yay. Okay, our next action item is the recommendation for approval agreement on the term, no, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve the agreement on the terms and conditions of employment between the Independent School District 279 School Board and Kid Stop instructors, July 1st through July 30th, 2022?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Director Brooks, seconded by, I don't know.
Mosquito Jones.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes 6-0. Okay, so then our next action item is a recommendation for approval, agreement of the memorandums of understanding between the Independent School District 279 School Board and custodians, hourly, technical, confidential support, and nutrition.
Thank you. On the agenda this evening for board action are recommendations for approval for 4 memos of understanding for the following bargaining groups: confidential support, custodians, hourly technical, and school nutrition personnel. The memos of understanding for these 4 bargaining groups are being brought to you due to language bargained in the 2020-2022 contracts that allow for wage openers to take place if there's additional funding from the state. During the 2021 legislative session, the state of Minnesota passed an educational bill authorizing an increase in state general education revenue for Minnesota public schools for the 21-22 school year. Due to this increased funding, these MOUs allow for base wages for each of these 4 bargaining groups to change from a 0% increase to a 2% increase beginning July 1, 2021. The provisions outlined in these memos of understanding fall within the financial parameters set by the board for the 2020-2022 contract term. It's the superintendent and my recommendation that you approve the 4 memos of understanding presented to you this evening as one recommendation.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the memorandums of understanding between the Independent School District 279 School Board and custodians, orally technical, confidential support, and school nutrition?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Director Douglas, seconded by Director Simons. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
I just want to just recognize and appreciate the hard work of all of our bargaining units that we had talked about tonight. And, I think we've all talked at length that, each have a vital role in our district. And every year, all of the employees, from ESPs, custodial staff, ASPs, RNs, LPNs, kids staff instructors, hourly technical confidential support, and school nutrition employees really have been dedicated to our scholars. And as a board, we very much value each of you, and we see the difference and impact each of you make in the lives of our scholars. So thank you so much. Thank you. All right, our next action item is a recommendation to provide notice of intent to offer a subsequent contract to Kari McIntyre in consideration of related authority to engage in negotiation with superintendent. The superintendent's contract expires on June 30th, 2022, and Article 3, Section B1 of the superintendent's employment contract requires notice to the superintendent by November 1st, 2021, if the school board intends to offer him a subsequent contract. To satisfy this requirement, is there a motion that the board provide the superintendent, Corey McIntyre, written notice that the board intends to enter into an employment contract with him that would be effective after expiration of the current contract, subject to the board and Mr. McIntyre, agreeing to the terms of the subsequent contract. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Director Mosqueda Jones, seconded by Director Greeley. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes 6-0. With the passage of this motion, I am calling for a second motion to designate myself, Kelsey Dawson-Walton, Tanya Simons, and Jackie Mosqueda Jones to enter into discussion and negotiation with Superintendent Corey McIntyre regarding a possible employment contract that would be effective after expiration of his current contract on June 30th, 2022. Kelsey Dawson-Walton, myself, Tanya Simons, and Jackie Mosqueda Jones are also authorized to work with legal counsel from the Kennedy Grevin law firm to represent and or advise the district in the negotiation process. And any tentative contract is subject to approval by the full board. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Dr. Douglas, seconded by Dr. Brooks. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes 6-0. Our final action item of the night, it was a long meeting so far, is gifts to the district. Is there a motion to approve gifts to the district totaling $8,610?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Director Douglas, seconded by Director Brooks. Any discussion? Always say thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes 6-0. At this time, the board will take a brief 10-minute recess and then reconvene in the forum room where we'll hold 2 separate closed sessions. The first closed session will be closed pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 to inform the board on the start of labor negotiations with teachers and discussion about the Juneteenth national holiday applicable to all bargaining groups. The second session will be closed pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05 Subdivision 3C for attorney-client privilege discussions with legal counsel in connection with pending litigation. Is there a motion to recess the regular meeting for 10 minutes and reconvene in the forum room?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Director Douglas, seconded by Director Simons. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. All right, motion 6-0 passes. So the meeting will be recessed at 8:50 p.m. School board meeting will adjourn at the conclusion of the closed session. Thank you, everyone.